and the whether or not a data center is something that this town wants, needs, deserves, desires, what have you. If I have any bias at all, it is in leaning towards the people having a say and a voice in this decision, in this course of action, and that we all get presented with objective information so that we can make an informed decision. That's what this is about. So this is it says it's a listening session, but there is opportunity for everyone in this room to ask questions, to state opinions, and to be heard. Because I do believe that the village and the leadership listen. But you know as well as I do, is when any time a question is asked, there's always this wondering whether or not somebody's trying to sell you something. Somebody's trying to push an agenda. Somebody's trying to force their will upon you. And we're here to address those things that lead us to making a competent, informed decision about this data center. It's a very contentious issue. There's going to be a lot of emotion. Some of the rules of the road we will talk about, but as you can imagine, in order to give everybody a chance to be heard, we're going to have to make sure that we be as succinct as we can. In the military, we talk about brevity being key. So formulate your thoughts. Make sure that that you get your point across without redundancy or over elaboration, and certainly without. Let's make sure that the decorum is in such a way that it gets the point across in a way that's appropriate. I'm going to initially turn this over to the village administrator, Travis Conan, who will talk about kind of where we are, where the village is with regard to this whole initiative and some upcoming events that are coming. Sir.
Yeah, so based on our last listening session, our last board meeting, the board heard, a lot of opposition to this topic, I guess, and also that we needed to have speakers truly from all sides, right? So our first listening sessions, we had our legal and financial and some environmental engineers with that. I know Adam and Contrita did some great listening sessions and educational sessions at Gnarly. So with this, one of the folks, one of our residents at the last board meeting, asked if we'd reach out to some of those. So I reached out to Adam, asked if we could get some speakers. That's where we got Paula and Prescott with this as part of to help educate us and educate the public on some aspects. We also brought in Cloverleaf and asked if they could have some representatives here to answer questions, on the questions that I couldn't, right? Why are they looking here? Why are they doing, what are they doing? I can't answer all those questions as well. But the village, again, heard this is what you guys wanted. So we have this presentation here today, or question and answer session. Also, the first thing that we're going to talk about is everyone, or I shouldn't say everyone, I felt there was a majority of an opinion that people, you guys can come on in. There's room on the side if you want to grab spots. You can come on up both sides if you need to. I know we'll pack the house, but wherever you can find a spot, come on in. Also, there was discussion on we need to put a moratorium in place. We need to put a referendum through so people can vote. There's challenges to some of those things and challenges to the point of statute. So we're trying to figure out the best way we can. As most of you, I'm sure, have seen because you're following our things very closely. We have a special meeting tomorrow to vote on our referendum coming up in the August election. Those are things that we have to have done by June 2nd to be able to get onto the ballot. So with that, we'll be talking on the slideshow that I'm talking to, and Chris Smith from Ron Breeson will speak to what we have put together and what we'll be voting on tomorrow night at a special meeting to hopefully get something on the referendum for everyone to put that in place. So with that, I'll start out and I'll leave it up to Chris from Ron Breeson.
Thanks, Travis. So last week, the village board voted to have a question on the August ballot regarding this topic. And Travis and myself have done our best to try to accommodate the will of the village board. And it was a unanimous vote. According to the comments made by trustees, they wanted a very simple question, something like, do you want a data center? Which I think we all agree would be the best way to do this. Unfortunately, villages have to follow the laws that the state has enacted, and a law that was passed in 2023 makes this much more difficult than it should be. And I'm going to just walk you through that so everyone understands. But the bottom line is a special meeting is scheduled for tomorrow, and the village board is going to be presented with this particular question to put on the August ballot. And they will then vote on this, modify whatever they want. But from a legal perspective, I'll walk you through how we got to this particular question. So if you can go to the next slide, Travis. So this law that I was referencing, it's 66.0144, and it was enacted in 2023. And you can read it up there, but it says basically it prohibits generally a village from putting on just a general referendum for advisory purposes. So what I'm telling you right now is the state law has a prohibition in place. That means we can't just say, do you want a data center on the ballot? Can't do it. Prior to 2023, we could do that. We could say, do you want marijuana to be legal? Do you want whatever question that the village board wants, you could generally put on the ballot, very simple, but state put a stop to that in 2023. You can see, if you read there, so it says no village may conduct a referendum for advisory purposes. So that's the general rule. Then we have exceptions, except as provided under a bunch of different statutes, 5 separate statutes. So we have 5 exceptions. And once I learned that the village board said they wanted a referendum, I pulled up the statute and said a prayer that we could somehow fit into one of these exceptions. Okay. And I'm going to tell you first about the 4 that I think don't apply whatsoever. If you go to the next slide, there's a list of them. The first 2 deal with what's called a cooperative plan between 2 municipalities about growth and annexations, things like that. It doesn't apply here. The third one that I referenced talks about operating a cable system. Again, just doesn't apply here. The last one, we're getting closer, because it's talking about telecommunications and things like that, but in that one, it's clear it just doesn't apply because it says the referendum would be voted on for everyone in a, quote, telecommunication utility area, which isn't this. We need a referendum just for village electors, if that makes sense. So the one that we're shooting for here is 66.04223B. And I have informed Travis in my legal opinion that what we're doing here is not what this statute was made for, but doesn't mean you can't utilize something, because frankly, statutes are used all the time for maybe something other than what their intended purpose was, okay? But this particular exception says a village may hold an advisory referendum to determine voter support, and it talks about for the operation of facility for providing video service, telecommunications service, internet access service, directly or indirectly to the public. I don't know, all that stuff sounds like things that a data center might do to me, okay? So, but again, I think if we would just try to put, do you want a data center in Wrightstown on the ballot? Like, we couldn't even make an argument that that is consistent with state statute. So we have to author the ballot question so it is tied to this exception, okay? So this exception is wordy. Unfortunately, that means the ballot question is going to be wordy, in my opinion. So if you go to the next slide, this is what we came up with. Okay? And again, most of this language is tied directly to that specific exception. So we can make an argument that it falls allowed to do it. Okay? And so I'll just read it because some people might have a hard time in the back. Should the village of Wrightstown authorize, support, participate in, or facilitate municipal utility infrastructure, public utility service commitments, public facilities, the operations of facility for the providing of video service, telecommunication service, or internet access service directly or indirectly to the public? Again, that language should sound familiar to you, okay? We took it right from the statute. Or related municipal infrastructure improvements associated with a large-scale data center development within or affecting the village. So I thought it was important to, Travis thought it was important to go through that because obviously if you're here today, you're interested in this and kind of peel back the curtain because most people never know how the heck do they come up with these ballot questions on referendum? Why are they complicated? We wanted to show you a little bit of how the sausage was made on this one. And this is what the village board will have in front of it tomorrow to vote on. And that's all I have for the referendum question. I'll turn it back over to the presenters. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So now, in the interest of full disclosure, anyone who's here, we're going to go around the table and just introduce ourselves and who we are and why we're here. So let's start with the gentleman here.
My name is Aaron Billiou. I am the Chief Development Officer at Cloverleaf Infrastructure. Been with the company almost since the founding, so right at about 2 years. Prior to coming over to Cloverleaf, I ran the global team for Meta for all of their data centers. Did that for about 2 years, so that was all of the land acquisition, the land development, the zoning, planning, entitlements, water permitting, environmental permitting. Had a team of about 70 people doing that, mostly in the US, but also in Europe, as well as a little bit in Singapore. And prior to that, I had a similar job, a little bit less scope, but it's a much bigger program, doing very similar things at Microsoft. Had a team of about 70 spread out across 17 countries. So I've seen a few data center projects over the years. I may call on some of my team over here. So Nora, why don't you give a quick introduction of yourself?
Hi, my name is Nora Bernhardt, and I am the Vice President at Cloverleaf. I focus on our energy strategy, how we can be a partner with our communities to develop data centers without creating a lot of unintended impacts on pollution and without raising rates. So I work very closely with our utility partners across the United States.
And then I do have two of the development principals on work with me on my team. So Jeff Lake. Jeff is in Omaha and has been working in Wisconsin with us for a while, as well as Travis Armstead. Travis was one of the very first employees at Cloverleaf and was very instrumental, as were Nora and Jeff, in working on the Fort Washington project.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Prescott Balch. I'm a retired technology executive. I finished my career as a senior vice president at US Bank. And almost a year ago now, I had a data center proposal land in my backyard in Caledonia. And we successfully convinced our village board and Microsoft that it was a bad idea. And since then, I've been trying to help as many communities as I can understand the same thing that I saw in the proposals. I'm trying to help them understand the risks as well as the rewards. You'll hear all the rewards, you don't necessarily hear all the risks. And it's been an exhausting battle. But I've been running around the upper Midwest just trying to help people level the information playing field. My goal is not to talk anyone out of doing a data center or talk anyone into it. My goal is to try to share that 38-year career experience that I had and try to help people make the right choice for their own communities.
Quick question, is it better with or without the microphone?
Maybe switch the microphone.
Or is it
I'll
just
try
that
that
microphone?
one.
Honestly, otherwise maybe just stay a little further away from that one, Prescott.
How's this one? Sound good? Okay. Good evening. I'm Paula Pintar. I'm an advanced practice nurse. I've been in the healthcare profession for 20+ years. My career has taken me across academic, community, veterans facilities. I've been in clinical positions across the continuum of care and various leadership positions. Along with Prescott, I am from Caledonia, and this came about. I brought the health and environmental impacts to our community and identified the risks that would be posed with a large-scale data center to our community. And I partnered with Prescott and various communities, bringing this message across for information so that you can make a well-informed decision. I want to be clear, I think the flyer went out that I was representing the Wisconsin Department of Public Health. Although I currently am employed by the Wisconsin Department of Public Health, I am not speaking on behalf of them, so I want to make that very clear. I am speaking as a concerned healthcare professional, and my information was driven by my personal investigation through our community and identifying that. And I also want to put a disclaimer that I am not against innovation. Being in healthcare, that's what we thrive on, is innovation. And there are a lot of good aspects to that. I'm not against job creation. I see there's a lot of union members back there, and I believe you're probably from the operating engineers. I wanted to let you know that I grew up in a union household. My dad was an operating engineer. I'm married to a union man, actually worked in the Oak Creek coal plant, and my son is a union man, and he also works for a coal utility. So I just want to be very transparent and let you know I'm bringing you as many facts as I can to this discussion. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Do we have anyone else in the room who's here because they're being paid to be here by somebody? Raise your hand.
I'm Todd Taves. I'm with Ellers. We're the village's financial advisors.
Okay.
I'm Bob White with the Board of Associates. We're also advisors in the village.
All right. Yes, sir.
I'm with Stasek. I'm Vice President of Regulatory Affairs for WPS.
Okay. Anyone else?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Logan Glassnap. I'm an attorney with Chris and Von Breesen, specializing in environmental law.
Okay. In my own full disclosure, I'm a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel. I was at the last listening session. I saw a need to reconfigure that forum and the format into one where the people had a say. I am running for a seat on the U.S. House of Representatives. I just submitted my over 2,000 signatures, so I will be on the ballot for election. I am here in a neutral capacity and fact finding. Like I said, if I have any bias at all, it's leaning toward people being heard. And my intent here is to run this meeting in a way that gets us to that end state. Okay, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think with that, we'll turn it over to Prescott and let you give your presentation, have it up here, and we'll kind of go from there. And Paula, we'll have you next, and then Aaron, you and your team can speak after Paula. Yeah.
Travis, is it okay if I introduce myself?
Yes, go ahead.
Just wanted to let you all know, Nick Trevelyan, District Director for State Senator Andre Jacques. Andre was down in Madison today. He's hoping to catch the end of this meeting if possible. Just because of conflicting schedules, we were not able to attend the meetings before this, but we intend to be at the upcoming meetings as well. Our office is not taking a position on this. We believe in local control and letting the community decide things on this, but feel free. I do have business cards. If you want to reach out to our office about anything, you're more than welcome to. I got to say to the village and everybody else that's been really involved in this, thank you so much, because a lot of municipalities would not do what the village of Wrightstown is doing. So it's awesome that they are getting these listening sessions going for you guys to be able to come together as a community. So thank you all.
I'll start by seconding that. I've been to a lot of communities and I have not seen this amount of
Yes, yeah, just maybe just. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's all right. I'm just trying to compliment you.
Thank you. I wanted to make sure everyone heard that.
That's right. There you go. This is good stuff. I appreciate it. So, the next slide, I introduced myself already. I just want to, can you go to the next slide?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So I just want to reiterate, I'm not a hypocrite. I'm not trying to say stop building data centers now that I'm retired and I don't need to use them anymore. We need to build them. We need to build them someplace. What's got me so interested in this topic is really problems that I see specifically with small communities trying to do data centers. I'm going to try to give you a sense of that, but that's why I'm here. I want you to see the risks and the rewards as well. But the risks that maybe nobody's gonna, that don't leave off the page at you. So next slide, please. So I have to define two terms. One is really easy, it's tax bill. You know what a tax bill is. You get one in the mail every year and you hate it, and you grumble and complain. But you need to know the term tax levy, because I'm gonna use it a lot hopefully throughout this whole talk. But you have to understand that what that is when I use the phrase tax levy. If everybody handed me their checks to pay their tax bill, that stack of checks would be the tax levy. It's the total of all the taxes collected. State law dictates how much a municipality can raise the levy. They define the levy, and then they use a bunch of calculations to spread it out across all of the different tax bills. So the levy is important, the tax bills are important, the tax bills are really important to you, the tax levy is really important to this guy in managing the finances for the village. But you have to understand what the levy is. And if you have to understand, I won't get into too much detail, but you have to understand how those calculations work. If you don't understand how those calculations work, you can miss a lot of the risks of these big giant projects in small towns in Wisconsin. And it is a Wisconsin thing, by the way. Okay, next page. So wherever I go, including my own community, this is generally how the arguments go. You've got one group that wants to do it that's saying, but the money, but the money, but the money. And everybody else on the left is talking about all of their favorite topics. But I'm here to say, well, maybe the money's not that easy after all. Maybe that big giant number that is currently calculated as the total building valuation that's going to get built times your current tax rate, that result is a huge number. But maybe it's not so easy to actually turn that number that's on a piece of paper into something that will benefit the community, whether through additional tax levy, which the village can use to fund services and infrastructure, or lower tax bills. That's the challenge here in a small community with a really big project, is how you turn that dollar amount into something that's usable, and beneficial, whether it's additional services or whether it's lower taxes. Next page. And the next page again. So we have three communities right now with active projects, but I'm only going to talk about two of them. One of them is a special case because of the Foxconn preceding project. But Beaver Dam and Port Washington both have active projects. I'll go out on a limb and say they've made some really big mistakes. They're both in a situation where, because of the way they finance the project, they cannot get tax levy benefit out of those projects unless they are willing to massively raise taxes on their current residents for the 20-year time period that TID is open. They're going to have a first round of construction hit the tax rolls in Port Washington, and it's going to be 30% of the total valuation of the city. And the tax levy calculation law of the state says that you're allowed to take new construction, divide it by the total valuation, and you can raise the levy that much. But because the construction is inside of a TID, when they go to take that new levy, so let's say they raise it 30%, if they take that new levy and then spread it out over the existing taxpayers, they're not spreading it across the taxpayer and the TID, they're just spreading it across the existing taxpayers. Everybody's taxes in the city will go up 30%. They know they can't do that now. It's been called out to them, they've admitted it in open session, it's on record. Beaver Dam the same. They know they have a huge, huge problem because of the way they finance this project, that the way that state law works, they are not going to be able to tell their community, by the way, your taxes just went up because of the data center. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say there's not a person in this room, I bet there's not a person in this state that would be in favor of building a data center if it meant their taxes were going to go up. But that's what happened in Port Washington and Beaver Dam because of the way they financed the project. So what benefit can they get out of it? Well, they can wait 20 years for the TIDs to close and all the debt to get paid off, and then everybody's taxes will drop like a rock. That'll be great. I have to wait 20 years for it, but they'll drop like a rock. But at the end of that 20 years, they will have had no benefit to the tax levy. So everybody's taxes will stay the same for 20 years, and then they'll fall through the floor. It's great if you're still around in 20 years. Not so great if you're not. But there's another set of problems in here worth calling out. They are both signing up for a very large financial concentration risk. This is probably my number one risk, and the number one risk for small communities. And the smaller you are, the bigger the risk. I took the Beaver Dam construction schedule and proposed valuations and layered it on top of Wrightstown's current valuation. If you had that project here, when that project was done, that would be 70% of your total valuation. Add them all together, current plus new, the data center becomes 70% of your tax base. One company, one industry not necessarily known for being super stable in terms of change, highly volatile, loves to reinvent itself all the time. I worked in it for 38 years. I love it to death. We did some fantastic things. But they love new things. They love the latest and greatest technology, and they move on fast. They move on when the math tells them to. So if you're going to go down this path, know that you're looking at that kind of financial concentration risk. And where has a single industry, single large taxpayer ended well over the long term? Flint, Michigan, automobile industry. Detroit, automobile industry. Those are examples of eventually it catches up with you and something really bad happens. It is absolutely a risk that you'd have to put on your radar if you wanted to do it, given the size of this town. The city's success is also, in both of these cases, tied to those projects. What was the first thing that Vantage did after the deal was approved? They went to the city council and said, we want a 24/7 construction schedule. Well, the city's now on a hook to get this project done so they can get to the other side and see the benefit. And they said, yeah, sure, fine. 24/7 construction, go for it. Hardly a concern in the room. Did not go over well with the community. But another risk, maybe lost in some of the numbers, is if your current valuation is about 560 million, I got that right? So if you take $1 billion and put it on top of that, now you've got $1.5 billion. Your growth rate right now is really quite good. Your growth rate would be the envy of most communities. The average community in Wisconsin has a growth rate of 1.3%. Yours is 4.2 over the last 8 years. That is phenomenal. But now, I'll go back to the calculation. The calculation is new construction over valuation. Well, when your denominator on that is 560 million, you're producing 4.2. If I change the denominator to 1.5 billion, you're now going to grow a 1.5% for as far as the eye can see. You've taken a large parcel and dedicated it to a data center, and you've destroyed your denominator. You've blown up your denominator to a really high number. You are going to constrain your future growth. The secondary question there is, well, how much growth, how much indirect economic benefit will the data center deliver? I'd love to have further discussion about that today. Hopefully somebody can ask that question, because I don't think they'll like the answer. But keep in mind, you are going to harm your growth rate. Your standard run-of-the-mill development is quite good right now, and you have to make sure that you want to destroy that and not grow any faster than 1%, and have inflation start to eat away at your levy after you've grown your levy from the data center project. You also need to look at any impact this would have both on open TIDs versus new TIDs. And a lot of that is going to be decided based on what you're going to do with the increase. When you get a new building on the tax rolls, you have a choice to make. Am I gonna raise the levy, or am I gonna lower people's taxes? Or maybe some of both. If you lower people's taxes, you're gonna lower the tax rate. If you lower the tax rate, when you get to the next TID, you're gonna have less money to deal with. You're gonna have less money to reimburse developers, to incentivize them to do business in your community. And again, you're sitting on a fantastic growth rate now of 4.2%. You're doing everything right. Every community in this state almost would die for your growth rate because you're beating inflation. So both of these communities to this day will tell you, we had the best advice in the state we could get, the best municipal finance advice, the best legal advice. They both got themselves into deals, saying they went into the deals because they wanted tax levy benefit, and now they are both in the situation where they cannot get tax levy benefit out of it. These are dangerous waters. Make sure you are looking out for yourselves and you're asking the right questions and you are doing the math. So let's go to the next slide. So some myth busting. The construction labor is plentiful. Everybody loves the construction schedule. It's highly paid. It lasts for years, but it's itinerant. There are an awful lot of people that come in from out of town. That's fine too. They'll spend money in your town. That's great. It will stress local rental prices. If you have that problem, it gets worse with this. Permanent jobs. Permanent jobs are often overstated. So I like the data. I went to Northern Virginia data. Northern Virginia Economic Development Corp says there are 10,000 and change jobs. That's the rosiest prediction I can find. There are 500 and some odd data centers, 550 data centers in Northern Virginia. The math works out to about 18 per building. Will it be more? Will it be less than 18? I don't know. But I also know that technology industry and the data center industry for as long as I've been in the business has been trying to drive that number lower and lower every year. They have a phrase in the industry called lights out operation. They are after getting to zero. That's what they want. And they will do it as long as it makes sense economically to do it. Do not do this for jobs. Indirect economic development, as I said, this is often overstated. Data centers attract other data centers. That's all I've seen across the country. That's it. You build the power infrastructure and they all line up and want to build more. Northern Virginia has 550 data centers because they've made it easy to build there. They've got the infrastructure to support it. If that's what you want to be, great, go to town. I'm all for it. Next slide. Next slide. So do the math. What will your financial concentration be? What is going to be built? What's your current valuation? What will the new data center owner be as a percentage of your total valuation? Are you trying to lower tax bills or increase the levy? You have to answer that question because it drives the math in two totally different directions. What's the impact on your tax rate? Maybe data center developers don't know this because they don't know Wisconsin law. But if you turn around and use this to lower the tax rates, you're going to lower the data center developers' tax rates too. They're going to go through the floor, save them millions of dollars. When the Port Washington and Beaver Dam kids close, if they haven't raised the levy, whoever owns those data centers at that time, they'll have their city tax bills cut in half. What will it do to open TIDs? What will it do to new TIDs? What's the impact on the tax levy? Impact on tax bills for the average homeowner. These are all the things, if I were you, if I were the village, I would want to see this on paper. It's not easy. You have to have different models. If we do this, it'll look like this. If it looks like this, we'll do this. But it has to get laid out on a timeline. What you're seeing today, what you're hearing today is there is a big giant dollar amount that is the valuation times the tax rate. But because this project is so big, it's going to affect that tax rate a lot, depending on what you do. How are you going to spend the money? Are you gonna spend it on stuff that generates operating expense? If you're gonna spend it on stuff that generates operating expense, what are you gonna do if this 75% of your tax rate all of a sudden the valuation gets challenged and it drops 20%? When something is 75% of your tax rate and the valuation drops 10, 20, 30%, you have a giant problem on your hand that you could only visit upon your residence. This is in some sense like winning the lottery. Yes, it's a lot of money. Yes, you have to manage that money really, really well if you want it to work out over the long haul. Don't let your village, I think they're trying hard not to. Don't let them just talk about this on the financial benefit side as a dollar amount. It is a really complicated picture that has to get looked at over a very long timeline in order to understand what can go right, what can go wrong, and whether you're willing to take the risk in all those scenarios where it doesn't quite go according to plan. And lastly, the dollar part isn't easy, and big projects create big problems. And all you have to do is look at Port Washington and Beaver Dam to find two projects that I know that those two communities are regretting because of the way they financed them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. So my aspects, I'm going to cover the health aspects and some of the environmental impacts. So data centers, why are they in Wisconsin? Well, they're easy access to electricity, easy access to our water, easy access to our land, and easy persuasion behind closed doors with dealing with small town village governments. There's a ripple effect and repeat effects from every phase of development with a data center. So if you start with the land acquisition, we're losing our farmland to data centers. So are we going to flip from being the dairy state to being the data center state? We've got over 57 data centers within our state right now. And so that is a concern that they are coming in with these deals and offering and buying up our farmland. They're doing the rezoning with small towns, and they're doing it unbeknownst. This is what happened in my community, rezoning agricultural land for the data center. And they only notified people within 300 feet of that property line, and my son happened to be one of those, and that's how we found out about it. So they do it very quietly. The other part with the construction phase is that you are disrupting thousands of acres of farmland soil, that soil is inherently has organisms and fungal spores in it. And so often those are carried within the air currents. This was seen in Port Washington, that it traveled across the berm into homes. And this was early spring and winter time when that construction started. It was entering their homes through closed doors. So with that bacteria, you are going to have an increase in organisms that are going to be inhaled and breathed by your community members. With the, along with that construction phase and the power grid, you have to develop the source on the power lines. So again, in our community, the young couple just bought land that bordered up against where the power lines are going to come right off of our power plant. And so they lost over an acre of their land through eminent domain because now that power grid has to go through there. Now they are trying to sell their home because they don't want to live next to these super-sized power lines that are going to emit electrical and electromagnetic discharges from once that gets engaged. That has been attributed to higher risk of cancer, mental health disease, cardiovascular disease, and so that all has a community impact with that development part. When you, part of that construction phase also is you have to look at the infrastructure of your community. Are you going to be able to support heavy equipment, dump trucks, moving land constantly? You've got scrapers, you've got pile drivers, which are going to be going well, they were 24/7 for quite a while in Port Washington. But that disrupts not only the ground, but your water systems. It's going to disrupt your natural aquifers, and it's going to loosen, and I know we have schools, and apparently the site is only a mile from your schools in this community. So with that pile driving, that reverberates, and that's going to dislodge your biofilm within your utilities, your water systems, and that's going to be dislodged within your utility system. So if you're showering, you're drinking that water, Legionella, Pseudomonas aeruginosa are waterborne organisms, and with that constant vibration, that's going to dislodge that bacteria within your water system. Most water systems have the ability to filter that, but if you've got private wells, those are going to be impacted. Another case in point in Beaver Dam, they started using dynamite for blasting their site. They were 3 miles from that site. Their well water is no longer drinkable. They have to purchase water. You've got farm animals, and the water is pretty much useless. And so now they can't even sell their property because nobody wants to build or live near where that data center is happening. So you've got those factors. Once you've got the whole production with the fossil fuel plants. And so they already discharge a fine particulate matter, which is a 2.5 micron. And I'm sorry, I don't have slides. I didn't know we were going to have time for slides, but the fine particulate matter is that air polluting that comes from the production of coal fossil fuel. And so that is an increased need to generate and support the data centers. Right now, we don't have enough fossil fuel production in our state to meet the capacity of the data centers that are being built. So they are taking coal-fired plants that were set for retirement, taking them and pushing those dates back. And then, again, that fine particulate matter affects every system of your body, especially if you have cardiac or respiratory illnesses. It affects our youngsters, our children, and our elderly population, and if you've got those chronic health conditions. To give you a perspective of what the size of this fine particulate matter is, and I'll leave these pictures up if you want to look later, this long depicts the size of a human hair. And so these are normal mold and dust particle sizes. This would be, the red dots is that fine particulate matter. So they're very, very small. They can get into your respiratory system very easily. And the other aspect with that is the discharge from the data centers and the coal-fired fossil fuel plants can travel on air currents for miles. So it's not just your community that's impacted, it can travel for hundreds of miles. So when we've got concentrated number of data centers all producing the same thing, we've got increased demand for our electricity and grid, that's going to produce more of this fine particulate matter. And unfortunately, the DNR is responsible for managing and monitoring that, but we don't have any surveillance processes in place currently due to the influx of these data centers. We have not put those measures in place. So we are already behind the 8 ball in what our surveillance will be for our air pollution. We do know that from 2016 to 2018, we kind of leveled off with our asthma cases for hospital admissions and emergency visits. But you can see again, where we're located, you're in a higher blue area. So we have some higher counties that are impacted by asthma already. So if you look at where our larger scale data centers are, it's along our waterways, obviously, but they're also going to impact the rest of the state where we already have leveled off on our asthma healthcare impacts. So and personally, I anticipate that that's going to affect that chronic condition for our communities. When we start looking at the activation phase of a data center, so the new part, many of them were air-cooled, and so that is a big drain on the water use. So going back to our water use, the fossil fuel plants use water to create the steam that creates the electricity. That's why many of them are located right on our Great Lakes. So they're using that. They're gonna increase that water consumption, although that water gets treated and put back, much of it back into the lake. But the new phase with data center construction is we're gonna have the closed loop system. That's not an end-all be-all cure for using less water from our state. Unfortunately, that water can only be used for a certain amount of time, and then it has to be dislodged. That system has to be cleaned because of the particulate matter within the water. And that water has already been now in the data center infused with chemicals that are called PFAS or forever chemicals. And so currently we don't have robust water treatment systems set up that can clean that water. So that water has to get discharged somewhere. And where is it going? Back into our environment. So again, I think that's another risk to think about. When the data center is activated, there has to be a backup system for power. And that currently are diesel-powered generators. Those are huge generator banks, and you need at least 40 to 50 of those. So if that grid goes down, or if there is a higher pressure on the current grid and they can't support that data center has to run 24/7. So there's no shutdown, there's no, we're gonna back off on supporting that. That has to go all the time. Those diesel generators have to be tested on a regular basis, and they have to be run for a sustainable amount of time. We did this in the hospital systems, that if our power went down, we had to be sustained for at least 72 hours on our support backup power. So that has to be generated, and that adds to that fine particulate matter that is discharged into the air and into our communities. And they're not quiet. They are, think of diesel trucks all starting up at the same time. In fact, they're, again, going back to Virginia, when they're testing those generators, you can see the plume of smoke that comes up from those generators that are constructed. When we get into the decommissioning phase, when it gets to that point, these data centers are built to be peopleless. As Prescott mentioned, that is the goal, that these are remotely run. So the job creation, I think, is still something that it is promised initially. Yes, you're going to have the construction jobs. And as I said earlier, I'm not against the local construction, but it has to be done within a thoughtful manner. What is this going to do to the impact of the health of the community? You may have some initial work, but now what are you going to be left with once that building is created? You're off to the next data center. But when you're decommissioning that building, again, you have to, all of those components in there have been, are chemicals, and they have the fluids that are contaminated, and it's considered e-waste. And so right now, we don't have an efficient process within this country to recycle that e-waste, and it goes into landfills or we ship it to another country. And unfortunately, we're shipping precious metals like gold and copper, and that's not being reprocessed. And again, we're contaminating with those chemicals that are in that e-waste into our environment. And again, with that contaminated water. The noise is another thing that affects our communities. So we've got the construction, so that noise is never ending. You've got the trucks going down your community roads, and is your infrastructure set up to manage that construction work? I mean, we took some of the back roads here, and I know I grew up in a low farming community, and it's not set up for that, and neither was it in our community in Caledonia. So we think about the noise. Currently, in outside noise, the EPA has identified that anything above 85 decibels can start to have impacts to your hearing. So it's the cumulative effect and it's the ongoing effect. And we know that a pile driver, I think, is like 95% of decibels. And that's a consistent, so you don't just have one pile driver, you have multiple drivers going, you have multiple pieces of heavy equipment, they're all above that decibel reading. And so again, the health impact is the stress to the community, it's the mental health. It throws off circadian rhythms, so you don't get normal sleep. We've heard that from our partners in Fort Washington, that they can't sleep. They have this constant construction noise that's going on. You've got the lights from the development stage that are constantly offending the community. Along with that noise, it also throws off the environmental. So we are in a lot of the flyways for our migratory animals. So it has shown that it throws off all of their circadian rhythms as well and their ability to migrate appropriately. I think one of the other aspects that is not often talked about is this race with AI and how it's impacting healthcare currently. So right now, if you go into the doctor's office, many of the larger healthcare systems have adopted the AI. So your physician personally being in healthcare, you don't always do that. You don't have the time, and you're relying on human factors for sustainability, which is not. They're relying on AI for that sustainability. And so that is a risk to the not only the chain of custody with your health information, but how accurately is it being depicted, and is it going to be relied on in error for a diagnosis and next steps. So I think there's much more that's going to evolve on that forefront, but as a healthcare provider, that's very much anxiety producing for me. And I think that too, once we get in, I'm going to backstep a little bit to the decommissioning, all of those processes within that data center, who has control of those? Where are those going? Where is our data? Who is tracking our data? Currently, we've had significant cuts in the EPA. We've had significant cuts to the CDC. And so we don't know where our data is going. And so to hand it over with confidence that it is going to be managed accurately through the AI process is another concern, not only personally, but from the healthcare aspect. I think asking the questions, being aware, being engaged. I think some of the processes that, from a healthcare perspective and groups that I'm engaged with, what we're looking for is some legislation just to slow down. It's this mad rush to, we have to be the first, we have to be the next. And if you follow the money, it doesn't go back to the community. It doesn't go back to where the source is being emitted from. And I asked this to Microsoft when they were in our community. I said, if this doesn't happen here, what's your next step? Well, we'll just go to the next community. And we've seen that across our state. And it's really unfortunate because there's a lot coming out of Virginia, and those property values have gone down. The health impacts have been significantly been affected of those residents. Property values have been affected. Nobody wants to live next to a data center. And when it is decommissioned, it can't be repurposed for anything. It's an empty shell of a building that wasn't built for your normal business occupancy. So you've got a scab on your landscape now that nobody wants to live next to, and nobody wants, what can you do with it? That's a little bit of a personal, I guess, byline on that. Getting back to the health effects, I think the biggest ones for me, what I can see with our current state demographics, are the asthma rates, our cardiovascular disease, our lung disease, and then premature deaths.
deaths. We know that the second highest risk factor for non-communicable disease is the short-term exposure to these fine particulate matter pollutants. And it can be 30 minutes to 24 hours can trigger issues in people that have these issues. According to the EPA, the effects from backup diesel generators can affect the entire US, and annual public health costs are estimated to go up 200 to 300 million, assuming actual emissions are 10% of the total permitted. And we know that there are cuts to our EPA, so we will not have that monitoring and surveillance. So we're not going to get accurate information, unfortunately. A recent study did show that power plants cause approximately 460,000 excess deaths between 1999 and 2020. And the EPA identifies that these particulate matters are the leading source of air, water, and land pollution that are affecting our nations or communities nationwide. Talked about the noise. So again, I think it's incorporating alternative sources of energy where we can. Load shifting, I think there has some proposals that there, and maybe this was Meta or where they created, they have to ask for permits for the diesel generators. But one down in Virginia, this was Elon Musk, brought in gas turbines to create their own electricity without the permits. And so we want to make sure that things like that aren't happening in our Wisconsin communities. We have a wonderful state and we have such variety, and looking at your state history, it's something to be really proud of. It's like my small town, it's like the town I live in now. Why would we risk changing that? There is going to be a time where this has to level off. And the mad rush is this company is against this company, just like healthcare right now. You know, they're rushing to adopt all of this AI into our healthcare. And so we don't know the ramifications of this. And so it's just, let's take a pause. Let's understand what we're dealing with. Let's understand all of the full impacts. What we should be asking are unbiased scientific impact studies to health and an environment. And I will concede there hasn't been enough research along those lines right now to really validate that. But that's again why I think we have to pause and really understand what we're dealing with and how this can affect our communities for generations. It's not just the here and now. Unfortunately, a lot of these developers and people that are coming to our communities don't live in our communities. And so that was another point that I dealt with in bringing, working with our town in Caledonia. It's like, you chose to live somewhere else. We did not choose to have this, but you're imposing this. And so that was difficult because we're here to stay. And so I guess I will leave it at that. And if there's questions, be glad to answer. Thank you.
We'll hold all questions till the end, and we're gonna hear from Cloverleaf now.
Are you guys okay if I don't use the microphone? Yes. I feel like I'll get too close to it and we'll start reverbing. So thank you, you know, both Prescott and Paula. I think you make some really compelling points. I think there are some valid concerns that have been raised. Happy to talk through some of those. Some of the things we'll talk about will be different information. But it really
Speak up for the people in the hall, please.
All right, does the microphone go to the hall? Yeah. Okay, perfect. Happy to do that. Thank you for letting me know. But yes, the way that data centers are currently being developed is different than the way that they've been done in the past. I mean, just as a you know, one just major point is a data center in Wrightstown, a Cloverleaf developed data center campus would not ask for a TID, right? There are lessons that have been learned and things that would be done differently in this community if we were to move forward with a project. So I think we can go ahead if you can follow along, Travis. There you go. So what are data centers and why do we need them? One more. Okay. Data centers, highly secure buildings filled with servers. Everything that we do currently is running through a data center. All of your health records, as was indicated, all of your air traffic control, your airline reservations, hotel reservations, credit cards, everything that we do is stored in data centers. These are highly secured facilities with secured perimeters, security to get into the buildings, and then actually security to get into the server rooms. And most of the server rooms now, depending on who the provider is, actually have multiple video cameras on them as well as locked doors. So these are among the most highly secured facilities in the world. And again, this is really the backbone of our digital economy. Everything that we do now currently runs through data centers. Again, I mentioned banking, healthcare, education, things like farming technology, government services, all of them. So as more and more services rely on data centers, we do need to continue to build data centers. I will point out there really is two major kind of data centers out there. One is cloud data centers, right? And so those are kind of like file cabinets that's storing a lot of the information that we all generate every day, whether we realize we're generating information or not. It's nice to be able to go and pull up your banking records and be able to document that you actually paid someone, a year ago or 18 months ago. All of that runs through and is stored in data centers. Then there's AI data centers, which is what we would likely propose if we're to do something here in Wrightstown. And that is creating the new large language models that are solving the larger, more complex problems. And so those are things like Microsoft's Copilot, right? Or Meta's Llama models, so large language models that, again, are solving these more complex problems in healthcare and all of the other things that we're now using AI for. So the facilities are training those models, and then there's also what's called inference, which is when you ask it a question, it has to go back to that model and solve that problem. So that's the inferencing component of the data centers. That's the signal to go forward, Travis.
Yes, I got you.
Trying to follow along here so I can look this way. So these are examples of data centers. Data centers do look like large industrial facilities. They simply have more equipment to be able to handle the incoming electrical load, as well as more of the cooling equipment to be able to reject the heat from the servers. If you drive by most large-scale data centers, you'll just think it's a logistics center and wonder why there isn't a bunch of trucks driving in and out of it, okay? So these are just a couple examples. So you've got a Meta data center in Mesa, Arizona, kind of on the top left. Amazon Web Services, or Amazon, in Virginia on the top right. Digital Realty, and then Ashburn, and then another one in New Albany, Ohio. So again, you can see these look just like large-scale logistics centers. They get built and constructed just like large-scale logistics centers. There is earth moving, there is pile driving just like every industrial facility. There is putting a skin on the outside. There is just more electrical and mechanical equipment. That's the main difference. And once they're constructed, they're very low traffic because there is not lots of logistics and trucks moving in and out of the facility on a daily basis. So what do these really, what are the components of a data center? So typically what you'll have, if you look on the left, is a guardhouse, and you'll see there's a secured perimeter that runs around the outside of the facility. You'll typically have a centralized office Some of the data center operators will put, office components in each one of the buildings, but more commonly, am I getting too close to this? I think it's the too close thing, okay. But more commonly, you're seeing sort of a centralized office with then smaller offices in each one of the data centers. This one is depicting sort of a 4 data center campus, and that you're seeing sort of in the typical data halls, 4 of them there, and sort of the Kelly green. And then you've got, in the darker green, you've got the equipment guards. And so a lot of the mechanical and electrical equipment, they tend to put in the center. So what that does is that helps not only with the visual screening, but it also helps with the noise that gets generated there. Okay, so while we're on noise, I will just say that I agree that 85 is a very dangerous number. And what we typically see in communities like this is that the data center will not generate more than 55 to 60 decibels at the perimeter. So the facilities are not extremely loud. They're loud on campus, but they're not disturbing to the neighbors. What I tell people is that the negative things you hear about data centers are based on things that have been true in the past. So in Northern Virginia, where there's 550 data centers, those many times have gotten built right next to very nice residential areas, and there was no noise regulation on those. And so you're getting that very loud mechanical equipment up against residential properties, and that's a problem. We no longer do that. We build larger campuses. We're very careful about the sound. We will actually make those commitments and produce sound models before construction starts and measure the sound once the facility is constructed to make sure that we're staying within those parameters set by either a development agreement or by any zoning that would get put in place. So continue on with the diagram. What you'll see then is just perimeter roads so that service vehicles can get around to the various buildings, be able to go in and test the equipment. There are, just to hit on a few points, there are backup generators. Those backup generators, again, the industry is committing to doing things right. We no longer use full backup generation. Again, historically, when facilities were smaller, you would put diesel generators to back up the entire facility. So if the facility, if the electrical grid went offline, the entire facility would continue to operate. With AI data centers, that's no longer the case for a couple of reasons. One, they are basically too loud. You can't put enough diesel generators on a single site. The EPA has a rule called the PSD, the Prevention of Significant Deterioration, which means you simply can't put that many generators in one spot. And so where the industry has trended to is only putting in enough backup generators to back up the network. And so if the electrical grid goes off, the servers shut down, and just the network gets backed up by the generators, because if you lose your network, you end up needing months to get that reconfigured. So that's really the critical one. So there is a small number of generators, could be 12 to 24, somewhere in that range on a modern campus. But again, in the past, I've worked on sites where we would put more than 100. But again, you just simply can't do that with these newer campuses. And again, the data center industry really has learned from some of the past challenges, and even some of the recent things. Port Washington and Beaver Dam are great examples where even some of those lessons learned are getting translated into what could be current proposals for data centers. Two other things that I'll just point out on this diagram. One is the substation, which you can see sort of on the top right here, and the transmission lines that would come in to actually power the data center, and then you would connect the data center to the utility side substation. And then finally, because I know this is a concern, you'll see the stormwater detention that is listed on the kind of on the south side. One anecdote about just sort of a positive that has recently come up about the Port Washington data center. I was speaking with the mayor of Port Washington, and he said for the first time in his lifetime, the creek into downtown did not flood. And I was up here 3 or 4 weeks ago when there was the really, really, really bad rain.
Good thing. Wow.
And he said this is the first time in his lifetime that the creek didn't flood because the construction of the data center actually was retaining the stormwater instead of it running off of the farms too quick. So there was a positive to the stormwater management on site.
Incredible. Wow.
So one of the things that we are all about is responsible data center development. So the Cloverleaf standard, this is something that, again, as we're learning more about communities and working more with communities. When I was doing this 2 or 3 years ago, communities really weren't getting involved with it. There wasn't the concerns for the data centers that we're seeing today. Part of that, and I think a lot of that has to do with the size and scale of data centers. So the evolution of the data centers, and Prescott certainly saw this in 38 years, it was a computer on somebody's desk, then it was a computer closet, then it was a computer room, then it was a computer floor, then it was a small data center on site, and then it turned into data centers off site. And so when I got into this business, we wouldn't even talk to the energy team. We would go and we would buy land in industrial business parks, and it would just get tucked in next to logistics warehouses and things, and no one had any concerns about that. At Microsoft, we could launch a data center with 13 megawatts, which is pretty easy to source in the electrical world. With these campuses getting bigger and bigger and having larger electrical requirements or larger footprints, that's really where we've seen these larger campuses and going into more rural communities. So as we have found that we need to work with communities differently, because again, we're learning as we're doing this, because again, a year ago, 2 years ago, we weren't really sourcing campuses of this size and this scale. So at Cloverleaf, we've developed our 3 pillars really for responsible, transparent infrastructure development. And the first one is transparent engagement and information sharing. We have no NDAs, not only with the village of Wrightstown, but with any politicians anywhere in the country. We just don't do that. We think that's the right way to go about it. We were leaders in that, and you're now seeing other companies such as Microsoft who have made that commitment, and they have now come out and said they're no longer going to do that. But again, that's just something we've always done. Public meetings. Here we are. I think this is pretty good evidence. Without a specific proposal, we're here talking to you about the potential for a data center in your community. And then once we get a little bit further along and there is a specific proposal, or if there's a specific proposal, we will publish project websites so that the information is available to everyone. One other note, I do have business cards here. If anybody wants to call me or talk to me, text me. My business cards are here, and then we do have some handouts that kind of covers the information we're coming to or talking about this evening. We will have meaningful local benefits that are important to communities. So we have a vice president of communications and community engagement who could not be here tonight. If we were to move forward with a project, we would sit down and make financial commitments to the community. Before we do that, we would understand what is important to the community. Is it pools? Is it the library? Is it things like that? So that we understand what those things are, so that we are here and making commitments and engaging with the community. We will work with a local community foundation to administer those programs to make sure that those dollars are getting distributed, and again, making those contributions early in the process. And then responsible development by really protecting the community. One of the things that we do was mentioned, we commit to no water use for cooling on an ongoing basis, right? There's a one-time fill in a closed loop system, and then it's done, right? So it's not that ongoing consumption of water. In fact, both the Microsoft campus and the Port Washington campus have also made those commitments. They're not touching any of the water in Lake Michigan or groundwater or other sources for cooling. But also, as we're developing, we understand that there is impacts to roads, water, noise, views, and so we're committed to making, doing the right things there for the community. And then, finally, one of the big things, and Newark can talk about this, I assume people will have questions, is paying your own way to prevent, costs being passed on to ratepayers, specifically with the electricity. Newark was one of the very instrumental people in getting the new VLC tariff passed. That was just passed by the State Utility Commission that guarantees that ratepayers cannot be impacted by new infrastructure or new generation associated with any data centers. So, common questions. I think we really hit several of these. I do want to hit the question about the number of jobs. The number of jobs actually, I respectfully disagree with Prescott. Everybody underreports the number of jobs or talks low about the number of jobs because they don't want to overpromise and undercommit. We talk about 500 to 1,000 construction jobs, but we also talk about, and there's actually just a study just released, I believe it was by USC, that talks about 0.3 jobs per megawatt. So if you had 1,000 megawatt data center, that would be roughly 300 jobs in the community. Those jobs are high-paying jobs, and many of those jobs don't require four-year degrees. So M7, who's the economic development agency in the southern part of the state, the 7 counties surrounding Milwaukee, has published on their website that the average job between the Microsoft and Vantage sites is around $180,000 a year all-in pay package. So these are very good jobs, and try to hire local as much as possible. The most common job type is either a server technician or fiber technicians. Those jobs do not require four-year degrees, and Microsoft has now made the training for those jobs completely free. And so people can take 6 or 8 months of job training and start at $75,000 or $80,000 a year working inside in a controlled environment. So these are very good opportunities in the community. But it's also not so many jobs that it overwhelms like a manufacturing facility or a chip fab or something like that. We touched on the water, again, closed loop systems. The only water that gets used is for the ongoing domestic uses. So kitchens and break rooms and things like that in the data center. We talked about the noise. And then, Noor, you want to just talk a little bit more about the electrical side?
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, first thing I want to say though is really important. It's that this is going to happen unless you want it to happen. Like, at the end of the day, we're not here just saying this is going to be foisted on you. And I think it's really important for you to keep that in mind. And you have a voice. You have a way to impact it. You have a way to engage meaningfully. This isn't just happening to you, it can happen for you. And I think that you have a way to do that. I love hearing that there's going to be a proposal, you have elected officials, you can address really meaningful challenges. And you can do it in a responsible way if you want. But if you prefer to ridicule and do other things, you can do that too. But I really want to encourage you to lean in and see this as an opportunity for your community and to really take the time to learn, because there are some really good benefits, but it's not for everybody, and we totally get that, and that's okay. So when we talk about like energy use at data centers, they are very energy intensive, and the reason is all those chips and those servers are consuming power and converting the clean electrons that are produced on the grid into ones and zeros, and they're zipping them around the globe. And that's what we're using. We actually go to our phone. We don't actually have a computer there anymore. What we have is a receiver, and we're talking to the cell network. Our banking info, it's stored at the data center. And what I do is I work with our local utility partners to negotiate energy supply agreements and negotiate the financial contracts that underpin the investments in new transmission lines and power generation. So I spent a lot of time working with utilities like Wisconsin Public Service on how to really build the generation stack. Generation stack is what are the resources providing power to the grid that'll support the data center. And our goal at our company is to make sure that those resources, when they stack up, they don't increase carbon emissions on the grid. An example of this is right now, Governor Evers, he got all the utilities to agree to voluntary decarbonization goals. It wouldn't pass the House, but all the utilities agreed, including Wisconsin Energy, which is We Energies, and Wisconsin Public Service. They agreed to reduce carbon emissions from the peak level in 2005 down to 80%. They're on track to do that by around mid-2030s. The main way they're doing this is by eliminating coal generation in Wisconsin. So as Paul mentioned, coal is terrible. Nobody wants it. Nobody in their heart of hearts wants to continue to burn coal. But to get off the coal, it's extremely expensive because you're gonna have to replace that with 3 times as much wind, solar, and battery generation. Or you could build some natural gas for backing up the grid. And what Wisconsin Power is doing across their entire network is reducing the coal generation, bringing on new quick starting natural gas generation to provide power to the grid on the coldest, darkest day. And they're building some really efficient units that actually don't use a lot of water to operate. Coal is actually, I was hoping you were gonna bring up the coal issue. Like coal uses a ton of water. So if you go to Clean Wisconsin's website, they have some really good information that I encourage you all to check out. They call it the Model Data Center Initiative, where they've really been leaning into this. And one of the things that they bring up constantly is secondary use of water. And the good news is the power generation that Wisconsin Energy is pursuing is actually reducing the amount of water that's used in the power production in Wisconsin. Well, the other good thing is large energy consumers coming to the state are offsetting the costs that everyone else will have to pay. So you're not seeing 3 times as much increase in your power bill, even though they're reducing the use of these cheaper units and getting new ones on the grid. And the other thing too to keep in mind is Wisconsin Energy and Wisconsin Public Service they're going to have a new tariff in place by the time this data center is operational that will ensure that all the costs are passed directly onto the data center and won't impact your rates. That's a really important thing to keep in mind here because that is one of the biggest issues, I think, is we're all seeing energy costs are going up, costs on gasoline, electricity, and other things. So I just want to put it at ease, we're going to continue to push this forward, and all the costs that we are going to incur at the site if we end up going forward with it will be covered by our company. So we raised capital, we make financial security commitments to the utility, and if we were to back out of the project, say we got 6 months into it, and we've, Wisconsin Public Service went out, started procuring equipment, started building. 6 months into it, suddenly something happened to the project. We decided not to move forward. We would be on the hook to pay for all those costs. So it eliminates the issues around stranded assets. That's really important to keep in mind. We have some real examples of where this has gone wrong in Wisconsin, and that's informed our approach. So I'll pause there, and as we talk more, I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and if you'd like to talk afterwards, if you don't feel comfortable coming to the mic, but you do have questions, I'll be here afterwards to talk. And then in addition, Rich Stasek from Wisconsin Public Services in the back there. He's much better well-dressed than me, he'll be easy to find, but definitely ask him all the questions you want. So,
If I could, I'd like to just add a couple of points. So right now, We Energies is transferring some of their coal-fired plant down in Oak Creek to natural gas. So that's not an end-all be-all either, because they are pushing out the retirement of some of their coal plants because we don't have enough energy to support all of these data centers that are coming online. And there's water use within the extraction of the natural gas. So that's often done by hydraulic fracking. And so they're using water from natural aquifers and that affects normal wells and the water line distribution. So once that water is used in that fracking process, it's already will be contaminated with a radioactive carbon emissions, and so that is again discharged back into the environment. So there's not a real robust way to treat that water. So I just want to add that. And
Paula, so far we blamed PFAS in our water, migratory bird issues, asthma, particulates in the air, EPA underfunding. I mean, did we hit all the issues that data centers could cause?
yes, if you look into the research, I've got the research, I've got the information provided there. So I'm just providing.
Okay, hold on.
You
Hold
have
on,
the floor.
everybody. Hold your thoughts. Here's what we're going to do, because I don't want this to turn into a debate here at this table. We're gonna shift the focus to the audience for Q&A.
Well, are you complete?
We had just a couple more.
Oh, I thought you were done.
No, sir.
Go ahead.
Okay. So if you just want to hit the next slide, we'll just hit a couple of things quickly. We'll go all the way to the bottom, because I think we hit most of these. So one thing that we will also commit to is called dark sky principles. Darksky.org is kind of the industry standard for best lighting practices, reduces urban glow by up to 98% versus typical projects. Again, taking the most responsible path possible. And then just on the traffic, I will note that before any construction would start, we would sit down with the village and the surrounding communities and make sure that the traffic routing and the timing and whatnot was done appropriately. And if there's any upgrades prior to construction needing to start, such as turn lanes or traffic signals for safety, that those would be funded by the data centers. And then at the conclusion, any roads that would need to be rebuilt would also be paid for by the data centers. So I think we can probably skip the next one, because we talked about, I think Prescott did a nice job talking about the potential for the expanded tax base, and I completely agree that the opportunity is there. I think you said it's like winning the lottery, which is great. We just need to figure out how to manage that money, or the village will need to figure out how to manage that money appropriately going forward. And I think we can skip the next one. And I think Noor probably hit slide 12 as well. So I think with that we can be done. I appreciate you indulging us there.
All right, no problem. All right, here's how we're gonna do this. Show of hands who wants to speak. I will pick 3 of you. Come up to the podium in order, state who you are, ask your question or make your statement, and then step aside, and then when we're done, we'll have the next person. Then when we get to that 3rd person, show of hands, I will pick 3 more, and we'll cycle you up here. I want to keep it flowing, all right? Be brief, be to the point. You, sir? You, ma'am? And you, sir?
My name is Ian Fitzgerald, and I'm a resident here in Wrightstown. I just want to address a couple things, primarily around energy usage. So, from reading the emails that were released under FOIA, it sounds like this project, if it were to happen, would be about 1.2 gigawatts of energy. So to put that in perspective, the Fox Energy Center, that's over on 96, produces about 600 megawatts. There would be 2 power plants that size about, that would, it would take 2 of those to power this proposed data center. Even though those power plants wouldn't necessarily be built near Wrightstown, I think it is entirely reasonable that we consider the impacts that those would have to the environment where they would be built. In addition to the costs and the communities that maybe they would potentially disrupt. The second thing I want to say is they talked about the tariff that We Energies proposed. Initially, the tariff was something like the data centers would pay 75% of the project costs for new generation of transmission lines, and it was only after significant pushback from residents that the Public Service Commission pushed back and forced We Energies to come up with this new tariff where the data centers bear the entirety of the cost. So corporations are in it to make money. and they will take advantage of communities if they let them. So it is up to us as residents to continue to ask questions and push back for what we think is right.
Is it okay? Ian, just one thing to address, the 75%. So there's two types of power generation that are pursued for the data center development in Wisconsin. One is natural gas to replace the coal that'll operate 20% of the time. So the DNR permits 20%. And that was what the 75% was covering. It was going to pay for 100% wind, solar, and battery storage. And the reason why I was settled at 75% was because these are units that would only operate when wind and solar wasn't on the grid. That's typically when power prices jump really high. And the 25% was a benefit back to the community, because the issue that PSCW brought up when we first started negotiating this tariff was, how do you create a benefit back to Wisconsin? And the data center would be on the hook for 100% of the costs, but then ratepayers would pay for 25%, but then they would get the benefit of the power generation. The data centers were just gonna get the capacity, and so that would have flowed back into your rates, but the commission had changed in the time that they came up with that proposal to the time when they went front to the propose. And so that's why that came out. It was a very convoluted story. And you know, I could see how people would get frustrated about that, but it was meant to be a benefit to ensure that ratepayers weren't paying a super high cost when solar was on the grid. Unfortunately, now that all that benefit goes back to the large energy consumers. I can talk to you more about it too if you want later.
Hi, I'm Dan Leiterman, and I live on Cheney Road. The data center would probably go across the street from my house or within a quarter to a half mile away. And my question is to each one of the data people, if you live there, would you stay living there, you and your families, while it's being built, while it's there? And I don't expect you to give an honest opinion, but to stay in a house you like, or would you want to have your family somewhere else?
I will give you the answer, because I get asked a similar version of this question a lot. If I lived in some place like you, like most people, I wouldn't want anything to ever happen across the street from me. The next best option is typically residential, and I tell people the third best option is literally a data center. Reason being is the data center we will commit to full screening, berms with landscaping on top, and when the data center is complete, it will be quiet and all you will see is landscaping. Yes, there is disruption during construction. I will say I don't think the 24-hour-a-day construction in Port Washington was the right decision. That was forced because as construction was starting, there was a delay getting permits, so they allowed them to do that temporarily. I don't think that was a great decision, but through management practices and through development agreements, we can limit construction hours and deal with some of the things like the particulates in the air. So a lot of those can be minimized, and the data center community is learning how to do these things better. So would I want a data center across from my home? It's a lot better than alternative options. You could end up with a logistics center with trucks backing up 24 hours a day and no visual screening. So if something is going to happen, this is a good outcome relative to other options.
Are you comfortable with health issues or
yes,
anything like that in your family?
The 550 data centers in Northern Virginia, if they were, significantly harming and killing all of the people living very close to those, there would be a lot more backlash and there would be a lot more issues raised. These are people, very affluent people living next to data centers in one of the richest counties in the country. If there were significant health issues, there would would be more press about that and more being done to protect the people.
I think it should be in an industrial area, the area for something to put houses. Nobody's gonna wanna build their own there.
May I offer a comment? To say that there's a little disruption with construction is an understatement. These construction schedules last for years, and Microsoft in Mount Pleasant is approximately 2.5 years in, and they have one building built, and they're just about to start the second, and they're gonna build a lot more. They do these consecutively, not concurrently, partly because of logistics of the parcel, but partly to manage their own technology risk. These guys here even said, we're learning stuff from Port Washington to Beaver Dam. Those things just started. Technology changes all the time, and it's great that they do them concurrently, because then you have less of an obsolescence risk. But it's not so great if you live next door, because the construction schedule is gonna last for years. Every community I've been in misses this problem. Don't focus on the permanent use. Don't focus on the permanent footprint of the building. It is relatively benign compared to other uses. But a 7-year-long construction schedule that's industrial sized in its nature, that's not a trivial matter. That needs some attention in your zoning regulations and ordinances and so on. It should not be discounted, especially if this is near homes or schools. That's a lot of burden to put on people, and a lot of potential temporary reduction in home value and increase in nuisance.
And so the way that the campuses are currently getting built, including Fort Washington, that entire phase 1, which is similar to the 1.2 gigawatt that was mentioned, is going to be done in 2 to 2.5 years. Because with AI data centers, they want to turn them on all at once so that all of the GPUs that are networked together can operate together. Historically, the cloud data centers will run for 7 to 10 years because they source that so that you get one building done and you need a new file cabinet, start construction on the next one. And so cloud data center construction is far more disruptive than AI data center construction.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Katrina. I'm a nearby resident and also a business owner in the area. So those slides that you showed us in regards with the buildings and how they look, those look like renderings, right?
No, those are photographs.
So on the diagram, it showed, you also mentioned that these are very, very high security facilities that involve very high fences. Didn't see any of those on there. And how does, I'd imagine with something that would be so needing to protect something, the dark sky, and I understand dark sky is shining down and not up. So what can you explain further? I mean, brims, sure, we see brims around the schools. You plant a tree in about 20 years, it might cover some of it, but how can you speak about, you know, a miles worth of massive fence and high security potential terrorist threat in the area being covered up by landscaping?
Okay, I think there was 4 there, and I'll hit them. One was the security fencing. So the security fencing is what they call K-rated fencing. Typically an 8-foot tall fence. They call it K-rated because it's designed to stop I think it's a 12-ton vehicle moving 30 miles an hour, driving straight into it. It just looks like a black wrought iron fence with a little curve on the top. Okay, that goes around the entire facility. The dark sky again eliminates 98% of the upward lighting. Again, protects the migratory path, you know, all of those things. On the landscaping, there is commitments, and it's happening in Port Washington now, for certain caliber of trees, certain size of trees, density of trees, types of trees. All of that gets written into and committed to up front. So it's not putting in a 1-inch sapling every 60 feet and hoping it gets there. And then the last one, well, I can't read my own handwriting now.
So I understand that.
Wrapped around Port Washington.
Terrorists, there we go. The real threat to data centers is not the physical threat, even though, you know, this K-rated fence goes up. It's the, you hear about cyber attacks.
Sure,
So that's the bigger risk there, which obviously doesn't impact the people living around it from a security perspective.
Okay. So in regards to water, I know we talk a lot about, you know, when the data centers are active and, you know, in full force, and we've got theoretical systems that will continue to advance as technology does, right? What you built 5 years ago is very different from what you'll build in 5 years from now. What about high capacity wells? Am I understanding there's 4 additional ones, or 4 going in at Fort Washington? No, so there's no well permits that you or anybody else has out?
No.
Okay. I'm on a well in this area, so is my business, and there's just been, you know, it's sad it's miscommunication, it says it's missing information, but it's documented all over the news. So I'm just having a hard time connecting what is happening with actual current examples
Yep.
of items that are happening at this moment and not things that we hope will happen in the future.
Yeah. So if you'll indulge me for a short lesson in mechanical engineering, because it's the best way to explain this.
Didn't hear that one on your profile.
Prescott's exactly right. That, or maybe it was Paula that was talking about direct evaporative cooling and using air. So the way data centers have historically been cooled is you take potable water from a well or from the city, turn it into a fine vapor, and you blow air across it and you get cool air. It's no different than being at your kid's softball game and people are out there with squirt guns and fans. Same concept, much bigger, okay? So that's where the water consumption comes from, is through evaporating. Historically, that's the way data centers have been cooled. 2 things happened. One, the continued public concern about the amount of water that was getting used for data centers happened. But more importantly, the new chips that are being put out there by NVIDIA, AMD, TSMC, they run so hot that you can't cool them with direct evaporative cooling anymore. You can't blow enough cool air across them to keep them cool. So what this has forced is these closed loop systems. So the closed loop systems use chillers on the outside of the building, air-cooled chillers, or sometimes dry coolers, but again, no water. They have a solution of propylene glycol and water. Propylene glycol, by the way, is approved by the FDA as a food additive.
Sure,
I
every day.
wouldn't
We all
recommend.
look through a lot of these maps, but what I'm asking is, like, are you taking closed loop technology and putting it into the existing? Or are you reinvesting in your current structures with advanced technology? Like, why?
So the existing data centers that have been consuming water will continue to consume water.
So, no. you're not.
Over time, those may be retrofit, but that would be up to the owners of those facilities. But the new facilities are using the closed loop because realistically, it's the only way you can cool these chips.
Yeah.
And you didn't let me get to the second part of my mechanical engineering lesson.
That's all right.
Which
I
is
think,
okay.
you know, it's a very different, as you guys in those emails we all read, playbook than what we started at the beginning of the year. So between, you know, ads in the spirits and attending these public meetings, which is great, honestly, like, you guys all were able to hop on a plane and come down to Little Greenleaf. Meanwhile, we're skipping work to try to.
Okay, ma'am,
you know,
I'm gonna
be
move
here.
you along here.
Okay. One last one for
If you want to
Paula
talk
over there.
afterwards, we'll talk afterwards. We're happy to talk more.
Okay, Paula, how long would it take to have a reasonable health study? Like, how many years would it take to actually understand the impacts of a project or something that would happen? And have we seen that amount of time consistently to have a true impact analysis?
That's a really good question. I know the DNR right now does monitor for air pollutants, and they have monitoring stations across the state. This would be a new element to include into that surveillance, which we don't have developed at this time. It would take longer than a year. You need, I think it's actually 3 years of data to really have something that is going to be valid. The problem with it is that we have so many data centers right now populating the state, and we're behind the 8 ball in having any surveillance with that. We do know that these fine particulate matters do contribute to negative health outcomes. So I think that's really hard to dispute that. We do have that information. Unfortunately, you know, monitoring with the EPA, we've had such significant scaled back regulatory guidance for that, and right now we just recently had a cut on the EPA that opens up the market for AI centers or development. And so I think we do need more research, we do need robust research, and that's why my urgency is to slow down the pace and identify where's the best placement for these. I know they're gonna happen, and I don't dispute that. We do need them. That's where our world is right now. But are we placing them in the best spot that we can with the least impact to our communities and our state?
Yeah, right, go ahead. I'm Christy Gursky. I live in the village of Wrightstown, less than a half mile of where the land you're looking to build. There's two subdivisions there, and 4 of the 5 schools within a mile radius. You talked about the construction that would be very disruptful for at least 2.5 years, could be more. We find this a concern. It will be very disruptive to our lives. Earlier, in the comments you made, well, we built these next to residential, we wouldn't do that anymore, but yet you are. Why aren't we looking at industrial? Why are we building where we all thought was going to be someday subdivision when it was no longer agricultural? We don't want industrial, that we have an industrial park. You know, I mean, and again, with the technology going the way it is, why can't we put a pause on this? This is like, hurry, 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 but we don't even know the impact of it yet. And I do commend you for saying you wouldn't ask for a tip, because we can't give you one. So that was nice. Just wanted to point that out. But this is impacting a lot of people. And this is impacting our homes, our lives. And you even kind of made the comment, or we wouldn't do it in residential, but yet you won't.
Yeah, so we understand that there is going to be impacts. There's really nowhere to build that doesn't have some adjacent residential. We would love to be in an existing business park. The availability of land and the size of land is not sufficient
So why
for
do we
what.
have to build them so big?
That is what the current models and the customers.
Let's change it. People don't like it, you're getting pushback from everywhere across the United States. Change it. So let's take a pause and wait till we get better technology.
So the other concern with the existing industrial zoned area is if you were to put a data center there, we would then need to build massive transmission lines between the existing 345 kV lines and the industrial area. And Port Washington, I believe, yes, but
there you go.
I believe that's what actually caused a lot of the start of the pushback at Port Washington was the need to build 3 miles of transmission lines between the site and the 345 kV lines.
You have billions of dollars.
I heard, yeah, we heard you, and I think it's an important point you bring up. Like, where's the right site?
All right, sir. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Walter Cloud. I'm a healthcare professional. I've just recently moved this area, but I've grown up in this area my entire life. And when you're talking about healthcare, I heard people say, we know what there is now. But you guys have admitted, but we don't know what there will be, right? So how much heat per day will this data center put off? So how much, when you're looking at it, how much significant waste heat will be discharged into our environment on a daily basis?
Yeah, I can address this. So there was a recent, oh, I'm sorry, do you want to finish?
No. I have more to go.
No, why don't you go? You go and I can address it.
So we have the significant heat that's going to be discharged, right? That is going to lead to increased localized temperatures, so more usage of more resources. Heat-related illnesses to our elderly, strokes, asthma attacks, things like that, which are then gonna tax our health systems, increase our bills and our cost of living. And then, along with this, you look at the mental health and stress that causes, because our children, that's gonna be wonderful when the wind shifts, or the wind's blowing, and they're inhaling all of this perverted air, that they then end up with a mental illness, they end up with ADHD, they end up with, oh wait, they could get a cancer, but maybe it'll be a good cancer, not one of the bad cancers, right?
There's no good cancer.
Well, I mean, you know, but maybe it'll be something good where they'll survive, you know, so they'll live behind your data center. So when it comes to that, what are your responsibilities? What are your responsibilities to our fire department, to our schools, to our children, to us who live here now, so that doesn't happen? Because these are the what ifs. You're gonna say, oh, these are the what ifs, they're not the what we know. We never know. So would you put something in the contract? Hey, if all of a sudden, what's the weed killer that we can now kill ourselves with? So if this turns into a Roundup situation where your polluted air is causing cancer in my community 30 years down the road, you're gonna put together $1 billion slush fund or $1 trillion? Because you guys are $1 trillion companies, let's be real. Kevin O'Leary's not a poor man.
We're not Kevin O'Leary.
Well, he's a data center guy. He's a data center guy. He's a data center guy. They're all data
I'm
center
not gonna
guys.
defend Kevin O'Leary.
That's a good thing. But bottom line being, if you build it, they will come. This will not be the first.
Nope.
There will be one next to it, behind it, in front of it. And that'll be on us and our children when they can no longer afford to live in the country and enjoy what we get to enjoy on a daily basis. So, I don't know what you can say to that.
No, I think you made important points. But look, let's talk about the heat issue. So recently there was an article in the newspapers, it was carried in Independent, it was on CNN, and it was about heat. What do data centers cause when they create heat? And they looked at data from NASA. So they looked at satellite imagery, infrared imagery over a 20-year period. And they looked at land 10 years before a data center and 10 months after a data center. And they made some extrapolations and they said, oh, you know, data centers are causing heat to go up on average where they're built by 3 degrees. You know, that's a lot, right? Well, what they didn't tell you is that a city, like if you were to put in a new school with a blacktop and a new road and a parking lot, that's gonna cause a 4 to 6 degree increase in your heat in the area. And this was actually in their research. So if you read the article, you come across that. So like the problem we're dealing with right now and why everyone is here, why everyone feels frustrated and overwhelmed, I feel overwhelmed, is because there is so much misinformation out there. To get an article published and to get presented on CNN and have somebody like you read it, all you have to do now is put data center and AI in it. You know.
So wait though, I mean, there's a lot of truth, there's a lot of facts. Who is the company? Venture? Is Venture?
Vantage?
Vantage? Who's that company? What's that company?
So Vantage is the company that owns the site in Fort Washington.
But don't you guys, isn't Vantage the one you hired to represent you here to build the wells with the well contracts here?
No.
These aren't your contracts for the
No.
deep water wells?
Nope. I don't even know. We actually have no well drilling.
Okay, I mean, that's interesting.
There's
a lot of names on here, addresses.
Yeah, go ahead. If you want to reach out to us afterwards, I recommend sending your inspector.
I just think there's a lot of non-truths.
I totally agree, but the first truth is,
I can bring jobs to your farmland if you want me to.
Well,
we can develop it in a better way than letting these trillionaire people that just want to get their goddamn stock
All right, go ahead, ma'am, you have the floor.
Hi, my name is Jolene Bennett. I live on Fawnwood Drive in Wrightstown. Just a couple of comments, really. I'm finding it very frustrating and stressful. At the end of the day, all these companies want to make money. I feel like the deck is stacked against us. We have nowhere near the amount of money to kind of go through all this, any proposal and kind of fight back every little thing. And I think you guys have a great presentation. You're super slick. I love the 3 pillars. Everybody does it, right? I think where you lost a little bit of credibility was the fact that it seems like if there's a problem, we're going to check and adjust, right? Check and adjust, which is okay, but I don't want to be, I don't want to be a problem that somebody else gets down the road and gets something better. And you seem very, like based on what I looked in the internet about your company, you seem fairly ethical. And I know you do,
I'll take that.
trying to make a buck, right? Everybody's trying to earn the bonus. But if you really felt super ethical and kind of portrayed some of the values that you do portray, why didn't you help Port Washington steer things in a better direction?
That's a good question. Great question.
So like you said, things were learned from Port Washington. I wouldn't have done that, or it was a mistake. If you believe that, why didn't you try to do something?
So I think some of the things that are challenges in Port Washington. So let me step back. The way we work is we get land under contract. We work to get zoning in place so that someone can build a data center. We then, Noor and team, get the energy contracts in place. And then we bring 2 or 3 or 4 potential buyers to town. We sit down with the elected officials, we take them to the site, and then we end up selling that package to someone. And then they move forward and work out the kind of the final details. Now, we're a real estate developer, right, that focuses on data centers. And so the final agreements and updated agreements, we will put in place things like preliminary development agreements, right? And there's commitments that we make that then get bound onto the end buyer. But things like TIDs were negotiated after we had exited the project. So
The 24/7 building thing, that
yes.
with agreement, like
Yeah.
I just.
We actually had the Department of Natural Resources, the wetlands delineation ready to go. And then afterwards, the WDNR made some different determinations. So we set up things, and as projects go and evolve, there are changes to the projects and final details that would have to be worked out, in this case with the village, but in that case with the city of Port Washington, again, significantly after we had left the project.
So I think that's important, right? You're the middleman, and you, at the end of the day, you're gonna hand it over to somebody who may or may not be as nice as you, right?
I'd like to offer a comment on that. The sooner you recognize that every single party in these transactions is self-interested, the better off you'll be.
Yeah, no kidding.
And the reason why I am so concerned, why I drive around the state, you're a small little community with $2.8 million a year in property tax revenue. You are up against the wealthiest companies in the world. They are going to, and I was part of them for a long time. They're going to try to get to a deal that you both agree to. If you don't know what you're agreeing to, you're going to agree to something stupid. With those 2 deals, there's criticism to go all around. Elected officials, appointed officials, the real estate developer, Ehlers, sorry Ehlers guy, but Ehlers deserves some criticism there. The legal help that they got, everybody messed up on that. Yes, we've learned a lot, but do you feel confident as a $2.8 million property tax collecting community that you've learned enough from their mistakes that you're going to do this right and not have a problem?
No.
Go ahead, sir.
Ron Zahn, a citizen of Wrightstown, albeit on the opposite side of the community. 3 very short questions, and I won't push back on your answers. I do intend to just hear them. Number 1, we hear a lot about the health concerns. They seem to be mammoth, serious, often unknown. Many congressmen live in Northern Virginia where there are several hundred data centers. Do you suppose that the poor performance of Congress is Second question, we are in a war with China regarding data centers. Either they're going to win or we're going to win. Am I silly to think that I would rather have some kind of problem right here in Wrightstown? I'd rather have that than live in a world in which China is the winner. That, to me, is really scary. Thirdly, Elon Musk has suggested, and he's usually right, because Trump is silly. He has suggested that in 2 years, 2028, he is going to be shooting up into the outer space, into orbit, many parts of a data center, because you can't put the whole thing up there at once. He's going to connect them up there, and he's going to have free cooling because it's sub-zero temperatures all the time, day and night. And he's going to have free energy because there's nothing that obstructs that data center from the sun. Is he nuts?
So let me give you 3 quick answers, and then I love Noor's, because I always love Noor's answers on these things. Number 1, on the health concerns, choose wisely when you get elected. No. Again, I don't believe that the health concerns, I think we need to continue to monitor and make sure we're doing the right things. But I believe that the health concerns were as widespread as some would have you believe, that we'd see a lot more problems in Northern Virginia. Secondly, we're absolutely behind China, and I think it's a major concern. We don't typically bring this up because we get accused of fear-mongering, but I think we're absolutely behind. I will tell you there's studies out there showing tens of millions of dollars coming in from places other than China, trying to slow down AI in the US. And that there are people out there with bad intentions, and so I agree that having it here and having the opportunity and dealing with some of the challenges is a pretty good thing. And I do think we'll see data centers in space, but it won't replace what's here. It will supplement what's here. You are right, there is free cooling, there is free power. To me, it's a scale issue. How many actual rocket launches can he get going to be able to support massive infrastructure build out? Anything to add, Nora?
No, I think there's a lot of people who ask questions.
Good afternoon, Nick Sagel. I live in the community that would potentially be affected by this behind the high school. I heard a word, we need data centers, and I heard it from both sides. I think we need to correct that to, we want data centers. That elementary school does not need a data center. That middle school does not need a data center. That high school does not need a data center. That Lutheran school does not need a data center. That does nothing for any of these schools but cause potential health impacts, which is very concerning. So I think to lead it off saying we need data centers, we don't need data centers. Secondarily, hearing a lot about these old projects of Port Washington and Beaver Dam. These are super recent, and you're kind of acknowledging that there was stuff that maybe could have gone different, which I understand. It's like a pilot, you're rolling these things out. But we're like the next stop on the train. How are all of these people in this community supposed to believe that this is just gonna be the magical unicorn where everything just works out perfect? No pollution, we'll only use the water once, there'll be nothing in the air, everything will just be grand. Like, the track record suggests otherwise, and you even acknowledge you're not going back to these sites to make up for the mistakes. The people of Port Washington are sitting for 20 years with this, and are you guys gonna go back and help renegotiate? Or maybe you're not the entity, but are you facilitating discussions to make it right with the community? And by the way, the Port Washington community didn't have TIDs either. They needed to get an exemption from the state. So the idea that there can't be a TID here is just false.
That's true.
So just want to correct that real quick. Just real quick, another point. You suggested transparency. When were you guys talking with our community? When did that start? January?
Yes,
When did we hear about it?
March.
We heard about it in March.
So,
2 weeks ago.
When did we hear about it? 2 weeks ago.
3 weeks
Okay.
ago.
So, couple things. Going back to your first question about the old projects and talking about Port Washington and Beaver Dam. I think the challenges that have been mentioned there were, relative to a TID and 24-hour construction, right? Those are very fixable things. The other things you mentioned, I don't think there's any concerns there with pollution and all kinds of other things that have been put out there. So yes, we are continuing to learn, and this community might have the opportunity to do things differently here. Again, we don't have NDAs. We talk to a lot of communities. Communities deal with that differently. I'm sure there's a lot of people coming to the village of Wrightstown that are having conversations about, hey, we might think about putting in a manufacturing facility here. We might want to put in a Starbucks, right? All of those conversations do not end up on the front page of the newspaper. And so when the time was appropriate, the conversation has come forward, and we're here talking about the project.
But who initiated that transparency to come forward? Was it Cloverleaf or was it the great people of this community?
The people of the community.
Okay. That's the problem.
Lack of transparency.
That's where it feels, you see where that's where it feels like the disconnect comes with the transparency piece, because and I know I'll sum up because I've been up here too long. I would have suggested to you guys in January, I understand all developments don't go before the community, but when you acknowledge there's so much controversy around this, so like, get out in front of it, be transparent, tell the communities that you're talking to them in January and March. These kinds of conversations would have been great then, but when we discover them behind the scenes, and when you have the evidence of like Beaver Dam and Port Washington where a lot of their citizens feel like they were left out, I don't know why we could assume that you were moving forward with us in a different fashion with that track record.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Rick, I live on Shanty Road. I just got a question about the facility saying it's a closed loop system. I know the water situation, but a closed loop system, I've seen them work before, and you need to clean them systems. And I'd like to know, you can't clean them with soap and water. And you can't just shut them all down, you gotta shut down one at a time. So when you're shutting them down and cleaning them with a hazardous chemical to get all that slime off there, all the, everything that grows on there, that stuff gets in the air. And I've seen people working on them, they have gloves on, mask on, and I'm just wondering if you shut one down, a couple down, and cleaning them, that stuff, the other systems are gonna blow that stuff up in the air. If you got a wind going towards high schools, grade schools, elementary schools, that's gonna get in their HVAC systems. And these kids, if you got kids, going to them schools, not all them filters can stop that chemicals from inhaling them. And there is problems with breathing, there are health hazards of breathing and respiratory issues with them. And you can say that you can use the cleanest stuff that is available. The cleanest stuff and most safe stuff, it won't work. We tried many of them on a unit we were working on, and it was a 4-story building, and we closed the whole system down. Within minutes, people were complaining that the air conditioner was down. So you can't just close down all your systems and have someone go out there and clean them all. You can only do one at a time, 2 at a time, 3 at a time. I know you're gonna have many of them, and when the other ones are running, the chemicals get up in the air and they're gonna blow into the village, or blow whichever way the wind's blowing. So, it's a concern in, I would say in the village, as far as schools.
And that would be a valid concern if that's how the system's actually operated. So just to check my knowledge, in the last month, I talked to the head of design of 2 of the hyperscalers about how they're operating and designing their systems. They both confirmed that they're using 100% stainless steel and that they're vacuum sealed systems and that there is never a need to drain the systems to clean them. That's the way they are designed, is to never need to do that.
Right, but the coils, looks like coils are gonna sweat, and they're gonna get all that cottonwood and all the chemicals on there. Your system are overheat if you don't clean them.
Yes.
So to clean them, you gotta use hazardous chemical to clean them. That's gonna get in the air and blow whichever way the wind's going. And you can't, you can say that's not how you're gonna do it, but there is no other way to do it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to identify something. It's very disappointing that we're here to learn, and all of the health impacts and environmental impacts have been made light of, which I'm very disappointed to hear that, because there are significant health issues. And Virginia has health issues, and people live near those data centers, are affected by them mentally and physically. And when a data center is running, there is a constant decibel level that is emitted. So it doesn't matter how many berms, how many trees you plant, there will be effects and noise pollution from those data centers. And the amount of electricity that is going to need to be generated, and I would really like to see the study on the design, because that's not one thing I've identified in my individual research, so I'd really like if you could share that, because all of the closed loop systems that I've been discussing with other cities and other developers, that system has to be purged and regenerated. And so this is something new that I really would like to learn more about it.
It's not a study per se, it's direct conversations with my relationships with those people.
So all the closed loop water distribution information I found is that this system will be generated, then it has to be purged and it has to be cleaned because of the deposits from the water. And then that water is
The manufacturer, it's probably, maybe you want to talk to the manufacturer, like, is that kind of?
You should have this information.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I think it's about.
Thank you.
it's
You
about-
made that very clear for me. Thank
All right.
you.
No, you want to talk to the manufacturer.
That's
Go
rude.
ahead.
That's
Okay,
rude.
thank you. My name is Sherry Van Rossum. I live at 440 Washington Street here in town. My mom owns 200 of the acres that they attempted to purchase. A very insane offer that anybody would say would be a really bad business decision to pass up. But my concern, I'm coming here, my concern is trust. So you guys set up the initial meeting with my mom and didn't even tell her that the purchase would be for a data center. So if that is the case, how can I trust anything you're saying right now?
Right.
Especially potential solutions to the problems when we haven't seen the evidence of solutions. The second thing I'm gonna say is, Travis, I appreciate you. I appreciate the village board. I appreciate everything you do. I grew up in this community. I love this community. This is not this, I understand you're trying to get revenue and keep our community going, and I appreciate all you've done. This is not the solution. This is not it. Jolene, you mentioned they are trillionaires, and we feel like we're so tiny fighting this. Okay, we are not tiny if we unite.
Yes.
My mom's no to their offer means nothing unless we all say no.
Hi Erin, my name is Kelly. Thank you for being here tonight. I respect
respect your career. I have a career as well, and I know you're just doing your job to collect your paycheck. But I just have a few things I would like to say. I wrote something, it's not AI, by the way, so.
Still stored in the cloud though.
Oh, you got that right. Okay. So after the contracts are signed and construction starts, I want you to be aware that mass amounts of parents are going to unenroll their students from the Wrightstown schools. These are schools that are beautiful, precious children. Step back. These are schools that are beautiful, precious children currently attend 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. These schools are all are which are located within a mile or less of the proposed data center. And when this happens, how do you plan on supporting this village when all of us unenroll our kids from schools? Or do you not care because you got your signed contract, you got your building, and you'll never come back here again? Meanwhile, we live here and we raise our kids here. This is our home and our town will suffer. Your companies promised us that you would not build a data center close to schools and homes, and you are doing both, and you're lying to us about this.
Hi, I'm a local resident. I'm named Karen, and as much as I would also like to speak to your manager, I guess I just so you're presenting yourselves as good faith actors. You're saying that, we're here, we're on your side, and we're going to listen to you. To that end, I have a few questions. You said we only have to worry about 20 generators in our backyard. You built facilities that have hundreds. Did you care about people around those facilities when you were building them? Did you? Was that a concern to you when you were building facilities that have hundreds of generators?
Absolutely, and there's very strict standards on the emissions that those generators are allowed to put out. The standards are set by the EPA, regulated by the state, and then tested monthly.
What about
and when they fall out of those emissions, those have to then go and be fixed to make sure that they're not above those emission levels. So I care very deeply, and we make sure that the data centers operate safely.
All right, you also said you aren't here to, I think you said run over anybody, it was your language. Have you used eminent domain to claim land for transmission lines elsewhere?
No. Nope.
And then specifically to you, Aaron, I assume like most people in executive positions, your compensation is a mix of a salary, a bonus, maybe some multi-year incentives, some pre-IPO stock options that you hope turn into IPO equity someday, which would be a great payday. Also, as a company that is a 2 to 3 year old startup in a fast growing industry, I assume all of those KPIs that you're bonused on are revenue-based. Is that fair?
I don't know that that's super relevant. I have a compensation package like everybody does.
Is there anything in the KPI that's not revenue-based?
Just salary.
Okay, so what I'm making my point though, is you're here saying, trust me, I'm a good guy. You have your paycheck and you're off into the sunset with no clawback. If 3 years from now, we're talking about the high school needs a new foundation because our pile drivers have caused it to collapse, or all of us here whose homes are on well water can't use our wells anymore. You have no risk and no stake in that game. So to present this as something you're in it with us is an absolute lie. Thank you.
So there is. No, it's okay.
My name is Scott Grip. I'm a village resident. I live a couple roads down from Travis. As a career, I'm a physician assistant in a cardiothoracic surgery position in which, for those that may or may not know, I make my living doing lung resections and completing and being part of open heart surgery. He kind of scoffed earlier when someone had brought up cancer and kind of laughed it off like there's no such thing as
No, sorry, misunderstood. You said that there was bad, like good and okay types of cancer. There's no okay type of cancer, to be clear. Sorry, you misunderstood me.
He said there was no good cancer.
There's no good cancer. Let's be really clear.
That was one thing I misunderstood, but one of the things that Paula did not talk about that I would like to bring some light into is radon exposure. So I live here, but I'm originally from the southern part of Door County and I own some recreation land there. There was a very small quarry that was put in about 3 years ago in which my sister lives next to, and there's 3 other houses that live right next to it. It's a very small quarry. None of those houses have had issues with radon until they started blasting. And they have not blasted many times, only a couple. My sister's house, along with 2 of the others, now tested positive for radon and had to have retrofitted systems put in. It's doable, but it's a pain and it looks ugly if you're not prepared for it. The other things that it can also cause is things like pneumoconiosis, which is an airborne disease like farmer's lung, things like that, that you can get, and the idea that like nothing's happened in Virginia. How long till the people that served and were there at 9/11, how long till they started showing up with cases of lung cancer and disease? It didn't happen in 2 or 3 years, but now we know it's clearly a problem. And other things like interstitial lung disease, the asthma thing's been beaten enough times, I don't need to bring that up. One question I have for them that you can answer when I'm finished is the idea of the cooling versus the heating, that they're talking about how NASA mapped it and there's no increase in warmth. Well, we know energy cannot be created or it is not lost, it's only transferred from one state to the other. So if you're using water in a closed loop system to cool chips or hard drives or whatever it is that they're cooling, at some point that water becomes hot and that water has to be cooled. And there's only 2 ways that I'm aware to cool it, is to use air or something that's cooler through conduction and put it across, or to run that water through something else that's cooler, such as ground in like a geo-based system, or in the past is you could put it into a river and then take new cold water, which obviously that's probably not going to be done anymore. So that was one of the questions I have, is how do you cool the water that you're using to cool the chips once it's warm? The third thing is that people have already brought up a little bit is the idea of like, we've learned significant things from the Beaver Dam and the Port Washington projects. My understanding is one is partially completed, the other one isn't even completed. Like you're sitting here saying, we've made major mistakes and we've recognized it. What I hear is, I've yet to build a data center that isn't an issue. It's not, it hasn't been perfected. So my proposal to you would be, is if you had a heart disease and you came to my clinic and I said, we have a cure for it. We've done this surgery 4 times. Nobody survived it, but we've learned something each time. You probably wouldn't do it. The fourth thing I have is one of the things I've learned through the quarry issue in Door County is my warning to the board. So in small towns, boards have a lot of say and a lot of power, and they conduct a lot of business. So we thought we had an end to the quarries until the small quarry person was provided a big time lawyer. The board went to their attorney team and said, okay, this is what was brought forward, how do we fight it? Their attorney team said, you don't have the finances to fight it. So my warning is, you may have an agreed upon list of demands and agreements of how they're gonna conduct business. The minute they decide that they're not interested in that no more, you're not gonna have the funds from tax revenue to be able to put a legal team that's gonna challenge a $1 trillion company. They're gonna run us right over.
Thank you for your service, Queen. And
I just did healthcare, I never
no,
served in the
yeah, but you serving in healthcare is service, and yeah, thank you.
But by the way, there was,
what you do with the water, please?
yes, I was just gonna say, you walked away before I could answer the question. So the air-cooled, there's units called air-cooled chillers, which are essentially giant air conditioners that reject the heat. So you take the hot air off the chips, circulates out to the air-cooled chillers, runs through the air-cooled chillers and the compressors, comes back out cool, and just continues to pump and circulate. No.
And they have no
That
decibel.
heat still has to go somewhere.
Yes, and that's where Nura was talking about, the gentleman who came up earlier was talking about, there is the 2 to 3 degree warming that you can see in the area.
It doesn't
There's no impact to the ground.
So it doesn't disperse. Like the study pointed out this like claim that 7 kilometers away there was like an impact on the heat. They didn't actually draw a conclusion from that. They were just like pointing to like, hey, we found this weird statistic, and that's what was picked up by the news. So I can understand why everyone's very frustrated about that. I was too when I read it. So yeah, I don't have all the solutions for you, but I do know that was a misnomer.
Go ahead, sir.
Sorry that I have this written down, but it's an emotional subject. My name is Brian Matthew. My family and I have lived in this village for the past 22 years on Justina Court. Thank you for having one of the 4 listening sessions on a weekday evening. Are any of the 7 members of the village board here this evening? Okay, I just asked that. Not all of them, certainly. According to the Village of Wrightstown ordinances, Chapter 8, Section 4A, the Village of Wrightstown has a planning commission to, quote, further the health, safety, welfare, and informed use of resources for the benefit of current and future residents of the village and affected neighboring jurisdictions through the adoption and implementation of comprehensive planning with significant citizen input. That's an incredibly important job. Chapter 8, Section 4K further states, quote, all members of the Planning Commission shall faithfully discharge their official duties in accordance with, but not limited to, the provisions of the Wisconsin statutes on public records, code of ethics for local government, open meetings, misconduct in office, and private interests in public contracts. Travis and Sue and others, perhaps I missed, I'm sure that you are aware of these requirements, and I'm sure that you are aware of the organizational and personal liability that results from violations of these clear rules. For example, a real estate agent who is actively working to broker the sale of land that Cloverleaf would like to purchase for the construction of a data center and could profit an enormous commission on a huge purchase cannot be a member of the Planning Commission. He would need to resign or be removed. It is that simple. Since very few of the 7 individuals on our village board are here, Travis, I will mention this to you, and I will hope that as residents, we will email the individuals who are not here this evening. I want Wrightstown to be an exclamation point because of the good things that it is, and not an asterisk, and a joke, and a scab, and a scar, and a nightmare, which it will be if a data center comes to this area. Please do what we are asking you to do. Slow down and never allow a data center to be built in the village of Wrightstown. Thank you.
Hello, hey. I'm Jeremy Stano. I'm a resident in town here. So you mentioned in Port Washington, the mayor said that the river hasn't flooded in this. I'm trying not to get too close. Okay. He said that the mayor said that the river hasn't flooded for the first time. That is presumably due to whatever's happening.
Yeah, the stormwater management, keeping the stormwater on site rather than allowing it to just run down the street.
Is there a, okay, so that's the drainage pond that they created?
Yes, as part of the construction, you have to have retention ponds to make sure that the rainwater doesn't run off site.
Okay, interesting, okay. The other thing, is that data center actually built?
It's under construction.
Under construction, so there's not actually any water statistics from whatever system that it's actually being used, right? Okay. And then the Beaver Dam, there was, in the news lately, there was a very cloudy jug of water that was shown all over the place. Do we know why that is happening there?
We don't have any involvement with that. I had heard about that, but again, that particular company that's building that is a company that I used to work for, and they wouldn't be drilling groundwater wells or impacting groundwater.
Okay, so
it's just an incredible coincidence.
Yes.
It is.
Oh,
yes,
yeah,
spoke
yeah.
to the person's well that was, I guess, no longer in use. And she had a creek that runs through her property and had never had any problems. It was pristine. Once the dynamite started and the pile driving started, the creek stopped running and her well was tested that she put out for herself, and her neighbors' wells were tested, and they're no longer usable. So again, highly coincidental, but
there's a significant correlation between the massive amount of construction and the quality of water. Perhaps, and I've read that there's a lot of use of water just in the construction process, save the closed loop system for its own debate. I just wanted to point that out.
You're gonna have increased energy demands to run those chillers as well. So again, you increase energy demands, increase air particulate matter that we know affects our health outcomes. So.
All right, thank you.
I have a couple of questions. My first one is, what other communities are you talking to in our area right now? Because I know you're sales guys, so you're not gonna put all your eggs in one basket. So where else are you chit-chatting?
I'll tell you the same thing that I know I'm gonna get asked by the newspaper later. Are you continuing to look for data centers in northeast Wisconsin? The answer to that is yes. We've obviously talked to.
It's a pretty answer, but what surrounding communities that are close to us have you had contact with? Town of Wrightstown, anywhere within the general, because we've heard a lot of, well, if it's going to come, we better have it here so we get all the benefits. So I'd like to know, how close are we talking? I mean, again, the town of Wrightstown bumps up right against the village of Wrightstown, and that's still the high school where my child goes, and the middle school where my child goes, and everybody's already touched on how gross it would be to have one there, so I'm not gonna go into that. So I guess, again, without dancing around it, what other towns are you talking to, or are you not going to divulge that information? That's fine if you're not gonna divulge it, but then tell me. Don't dance around it. Give me a straight shoot. I'm a straight shooter here, so.
Yeah, again, we're continuing to look, but we're not at liberty to tell you the exact location.
So then my other question is we've been told that our village did not retain the lawyer that we had because they spoke at an info session about data centers, which was a conflict of interest. I am a little curious, and I mean, transparency, so we'll announce that over and over again. We acquired a different lawyer, and he happened to be the lawyer that was working for the municipality of Port Washington. Doesn't really bode well for me for confidence-wise. Was that suggestion put out by you guys at all, or was that something that our village did on their own?
It was not a suggestion of ours.
Okay, thank you.
Hello everybody, my name is Joe Major. I'm a resident here in the village. I've lived here since 08 when my parents moved up here, bought a house here in 2020. Very, very invested in this community, Firstly, gentlemen, thank you for coming here. I'm sure it's not easy being in the firing squad, I have a lot of respect for you.
Thank you.
So first, I would like to say, I am against the data centers. I work in the technology industry, It's just something that I don't fully understand. I don't think we fully understand the effects of, and I think the general consensus here is that we don't really want to be an experiment in, what can go right and what can go wrong. Let's say pie in the sky here. We've heard health concerns, water concerns, the closed loop system. Actually, it's very interesting. I worked in the process industry, so that's all very interesting to me. Let's say pie in the sky, purely theoretical. You get the contract, you get the land, and everything goes swimmingly. What benefits could we see in the community, and how are you people going to integrate into the culture of this community? We are a small farming town, definitely not used to giant AI data center, next to the high school, if I'm to presume. What's the benefits?
And we don't need swimming pools.
So there is the opportunity for the increased tax revenue. As Prescott points out, you need to be careful and thoughtful about how that revenue goes in and gets distributed. Again, the mill levy, the taxes, increase in services, all of that needs to be figured out. There will be increase from the commitments we make in terms of things that might be important to the community. And again, our team would come in and listen to the community and understand what is important. You would have the jobs, the high-paying jobs, the opportunity for kids to be able to stay local, work in technology as opportunities. The companies that come in all have community development groups that have ongoing community benefits that, again, a lot of that tends to center around the schools and the community colleges and increase in education. And then I'm glad you opened the door to this, and this is something that people have a hard time wrapping their mind around, but in the long term, communities that have data centers have significantly increased property values. The reason that happens is because you end up with better roads, you end up with better traffic systems, you end up with better water and wastewater systems funded through the data centers, you end up with better electrical grid stability, and you end up with better schools, and if done properly, you end up with lower property taxes. So when this gets done right, and by the way, I know there's concerns about this being an experiment. These are not experimental. There's, again, hundreds and thousands of data centers that have been built and doing these things across the country. There's the opportunity for the village of Wrightstown to significantly increase, again, the property values for the homes, the schools, all of those things are the opportunity that data centers bring.
Very good. Phil, thank you for your time today.
You bet. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. State Senator Andre Jean, my district director, I think, introduced himself earlier at the start of the proceedings. I had a commitment to speak to the Mishicot school kids at the Capitol, so I just came back from that. Appreciate the village hosting tonight. I've had the opportunity to talk with Prescott before on a few occasions, and of course just had the Manitowoc Towns Association last week.
Yes, Jeff was there speaking at that. I was out of town.
That was okay.
Yes.
So, I guess I just wanted to let folks know again, happy to advocate for your concerns throughout this process. I come at this with, I guess, the experience of taking office right after the state of Wisconsin took away local control for industrial wind siting. I know some of you are very familiar with that situation. Yes, I see you, Glenn. Of course, a couple pieces of legislation. One actually was voted out of committee in the Senate on a bipartisan basis to prohibit non-disclosure agreements related to data centers, whether that was to keep information from local governments or from property owners in the community at large. I just feel it's very important that we have transparency. So again, I very much appreciate this open forum here tonight. Along with that, there's been the question of subsidies, which I have opposed. In fact, that was attempted as a standalone piece of legislation, which the Senate did not go along with after it passed the Assembly, which is why it got snuck into the budget bill. There have been some other pieces of legislation that have tried to do that. And I think if it's something that's a good deal for the community, then we should be doing it on that basis, as opposed to, quite frankly, data centers were being used to sell the idea that we needed the ROFR, right of first refusal legislation, earlier this session. But anyhow, like I said, great to see the community turned out here in large numbers, and again, happy to talk to folks. But one big differentiation between right now and, again, when I took office, is that the state took away the ability for local government to do things like what occurred in Manitowoc County in terms of the moratorium that was recently enacted. So I just, like I said, certainly support local control and decision-making here at the local level. And again, I see we have a robust process that's already been in place here. So great to see everybody, and thank you.
Hey, Andre, can I ask you a question? You have a big family, right? 4 or 5 kids?
7.
7. Would you, if they build this data center, would you buy a plot of land and live there with your family? And we'll put a house right there for you. Would you do that? Would you live right next to the data center? Yes or no? Yes or no?
No.
Yes or no?
I'll be a politician. Yes or no? Simple as that.
The right answer is no.
No, I mean,
yeah, no.
One of the things, I heard the houses that were right next to, the non-consenting adjoining property owners with industrial wind turbines. And I think one of the things that we have found is that something does not have to impact the entirety of the population for it to still have a very acute impact on a significant portion of the population. Obviously, if a kid has allergies to peanuts or something else, you want the whole class, the whole school to know about that. So, again, I have not experienced, a large data center anywhere in the state of Wisconsin.
I'm, you know, again, my stance has been for full transparency and people doing their homework, so. Thank you.
Yes or no? Yes or
no?
Yes or no?
Okay. Come on up, sir.
Good evening, my name is Tony Decker. My wife and I live on Golden Wheat Lane in Wrightstown. We've lived here for about 5 years. We moved from Southern California, and when we moved here, we thought, okay, this is gonna be our dream home. We could have chosen to live anywhere in the United States, pretty much. And we were blessed to be able to find a wonderful home here. I work for a federal funded research and development center that's based in Chantilly, Virginia. And so I am on phone calls with people in that area, and right next door, they're in Fairfax County, right next door to Loudoun County, where, in Prince William County, where data centers are just ubiquitous. And so I've been asking them, hey, what do you think of these? And you know, there's some people who are like, well, yeah, there's some decent about it, you know, but there's other people like, we haven't seen a dime. And that could go to some of your points that you made about how the local community spends that extra revenue. And then the negative comments start coming out. And they're concerning, I'll be honest with you. Now, when I looked at the pictures, we all looked at the pictures of the 4 different data centers. First of all, there's some disagreement as to the size of the proposed data center, could be a data center that could be built here. Is it truly going to be a hyperscale data center?
That is a possibility. It'll depend on the land. Would depend on the amount of power that we could get. And obviously, before any proposal could be made, we need to work through this and through zoning and whatnot. But theoretically, it could be a large-scale data center, hyperscale.
So about the same size as Port Washington?
Phase 1 of Port Washington is about the same size that the energy request is that we're currently discussing.
And so when we look at a data center of that size, we really don't have a reference point here in Wrightstown. Can you speak to the footprint, the physical footprint of what this complex, this mega complex would be?
On one video, didn't it say 74 Lambeau Fields?
I can't reference 74 Lambeau Fields. What I can tell you is you would have, if it was the same as Port Washington, Port Washington has 4 buildings that are around 600,000 square feet, which again is you know, sort of a large industrial distribution warehouse kind of a facility.
So 2.5 million square feet is not?
It's not an unreasonable number.
It's not right.
Yeah.
How many acres would that be?
43,560 acres.
43,000.
43,560 square feet in an acre. So a 600,000 square foot building is about 15 acres.
Yeah, so,
Per building.
Per building. The people that I work with, one of the things that they mentioned is that, well, and we've heard some of this, where you build one and it's not long after that. That's their beachhead.
Yep.
Not long after that, you know, it's like, okay, people are, you know, there's one already made, you know, maybe someone 3, 4, 5 miles away is gonna be open to selling their land for a lot of money. But let's be honest, it's a buttload of money. And so you would literally see this area, and this goes back to my original point, we could have moved anywhere, but we chose Wrightstown because of it's a beautiful quaint town, it's quiet, it's peaceful. There is no urban sprawl, if you will, but that will change immediately once a data center of that size gets built. We're not talking about an Ace Hardware store or another school. This facility would utterly dwarf anything that's within 50 miles.
Well, not within 50 miles of here. There are many distribution centers within 50 miles that are larger than 600,000 square feet, as you just drive the interstates. They
Yeah,
are
but
out
it
there.
could be 2.5 million, right?
It would be
2.4 million.
potentially 4 buildings if it was similar.
2.4 million square
Yeah.
feet.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you've been
And
to
so
a
it would,
Conwalk, that's the
it would
size
look
of
like
Palm Beach and
some of the
Garden
industrial
combined.
developments that you would see,
Larger than that.
you would see along the interstates. However, again, we're committing to full screening of the facility, so it wouldn't be able to be visible from anywhere on the outside. The other thing I would tell you is in this kind of a location with AI data centers, you won't see multiples of them starting to spring up. So earlier I mentioned cloud data centers versus AI. Again, cloud is like file cabinets. And so in Northern Virginia, when they're like, oh my gosh, we're getting full, we gotta go to the next site and the next site and the next site, because people like Amazon have availability zones and they have to continue to do that. So this type facility and what you're seeing with these larger scale AI campuses, they really are one-off campuses where you won't see multiples of them. The energy isn't there, the grid isn't there to support them. The small ones in Northern Virginia are 12 megawatts, 16 megawatts, 30 megawatts is a very large site there, which is why the number of jobs is fairly low at those sites as well.
You put that in writing?
Which part?
That there will be only one only in this
Well,
area?
the village and the surrounding communities have the ability to do that, right? So in many ways, you actually have kind of a moratorium on data centers now because there's no allowable land use for it, right? So you'd have to the village would have to implement something to allow it to come in. So there is de facto, a moratorium. And to your question, if this went through and there was a data center built, if someone else wanted to build another data center, they would have to go through the same process or similar process in order to get that done.
Okay, we're coming up toward the end. We got time for one more question, and then we're gonna go back, because there's been some new folks that have come in since the conversation about a referendum. So one more question. Sir, we got it.
No, I was just gonna say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Travis,
All right.
and everyone being here.
My comment is very brief, but I'm sitting here listening and I'm feeling like a lot of the things you're saying are just very disingenuous, because it's incredibly misleading to comment on what will happen on a lot of possible scenarios that you folks will no longer be around for. I mean, this is a handoff situation that concerns me a lot. This is my main point. You're too big. Meta's too big. Microsoft too big. Vantage too big. It took our village an entire week to deal with a fairly simple issue of a referendum. We cannot engage with these folks. I'm gonna echo what Sheriff Razum said. This is a just say no situation. I think the commentary keeps showing it. We cannot compete. We cannot compete legally. We cannot compete in any way with entities this large. It is difficult to even wrap your mind around how large some and well-funded these entities are. That's what I wanted to end with today. Thank you.
Short question. So as we know, Wisconsin is very generous with the tax exemptions for hyperscale data centers. It is estimated that the Fort Washington data center is estimated to forego around $1.5 billion in tax revenue during construction. My question is, will you be applying for tax exemptions if this data center is?
So the whole reason that there is a data center industry recently, Microsoft was the first one with their project in Racine. The tech companies do not build data centers in states that do not have sales and use tax exemptions. So that opens the door for these large scale projects. So we would expect that someone who would come in would take advantage of the laws that are on the books and take advantage of the sales and use tax exemptions. What we are seeing is that people are not asking for property tax abatements and things that they historically have done. Microsoft announced about 3 weeks ago, as an example, that they will no longer be seeking any property tax exemptions because they want to pay their own way. So the sales and use tax exemption that is on the books will likely be applied for by a data center operator, but you'll see that others likely will not.
Yeah, so just for reference, the data centers that are being built have tax exemptions on construction materials, servers, networking equipment, cooling systems, generators, electric infrastructure, and ongoing replacement equipment. So pretty much everything that a data center might need is exempt. So that just means if we want it to stop in Wisconsin and the state, we just need to stop the state laws to allowing that.
Yeah, could you? My name is Chris Smith. I'm an attorney retained by the village. I gave this presentation at the beginning, but I feel like a lot of people weren't here right at 4, so we're just gonna do it again. It's not very long. I know we're past the time we advertised, but I think it's important because we're gonna talk about where we are in the process here from a village perspective. Last week, the village board unanimously voted to direct village representatives, staff, Travis, myself, to get a referendum on the August ballot on this topic. And the words that were used by the village board members were, let's have this very clear, just simple, do you want a data center or not? And then you get to vote, and then there's an election. And the village board directed us to, do what we can to get this on the August ballot. So there's some tight timelines here because of when ballots information have to be turned over to the county, and the county has to create the ballots. So that's what happened. Tomorrow, there's a special village board meeting, and they'll be voting on the actual ballot language. But I think it's important to talk about how we got there, because unfortunately, state law precludes us from having just a very simple question, like I think we would all like to have. And I'm going to show you the law that we're talking about. And it's interesting, the last person that just spoke about the sales and use tax exemption, which was passed in 23. This law was also passed in 23 by the state, which says no village may conduct a referendum for advisory purposes, except, and we'll get to the exceptions, but.
Chris, can I interrupt you for 1 minute too? And to the point where we talk about, to the point where we talk about, it's kind of, I don't even know what the word was used, but because of the conflict of interest, we couldn't use our current lawyer, Bob Gagan. To Chris's spot here, Bob Gagan told us we couldn't do a referendum or a moratorium at all. I did look into him. Chris is the one that actually said, if there's a possibility, this is the one to get to all the residents. Again, our current lawyer, that maybe it was coincidence was the word used, why there was a conflict of interest. He told us he couldn't serve us anymore on this topic, and he also said we couldn't have a moratorium or a referendum.
I think most municipal lawyers across the state of Wisconsin, if you would ask the questions, can a village do an advisory referendum? Right, your off the top of your head answer is no, because of this law that they passed that says no city, village, or town may conduct a referendum for advisory purposes. Before this law was passed, a village could put whatever they wanted. Do you want to have marijuana legal in the village? They could put that on there, okay? But the state stopped this. So I will be the first to admit, we are being creative here on how to get this on the ballot, because it's what the village board unanimously directed us to do. I'm assuming after listening, to the community. So I guess the big part here to take away is the exceptions, okay? So no village may conduct a referendum for advisory purposes except as provided under, and then and it gives you 5 specific statutes where you can do an advisory referendum. And when I was told, what the village board wanted here, I went back and looked at this law. I just said to myself, I hope one of these somehow apply, okay? So going to the next slide, 4 of them I think obviously do not apply. The first 2 have to do with cooperative agreements between municipalities regarding borders, just doesn't apply at all. The next one talks about the government operating a cable system. Again, it doesn't apply either. The last one, 196-204-2MB2, starts to use some language that you might think could apply to data centers, because it's talking about telecommunications service. The problem with that one is it says the voters on that referendum have to be within the telecommunications utility area, not the village, and we don't have a telecommunications utility area, so that one can't apply either. So the next one says this: a village may hold an advisory referendum to determine voter support for, quoting, the operation of a facility providing video service, telecommunications service, or internet access service directly or indirectly to the public. That uses a lot of words that I think you could argue that a data center does, right? So this is what we're using, okay? And again, I think we're definitely operating in gray areas, but it's, in my opinion, the only way to do what the board has directed, which is to get this on the August ballot. Unfortunately, if we were to just say, do you want a data center, there's no one that could argue that we'd be in compliance with state law, okay? So we have to take the ballot question and tie it to that exception. And so this is what we came up with. And I'm sure there's people who can't really read it, so I'll just read it to you. Should the village of Wrightstown authorize, support, participate in, or facilitate municipal utility infrastructure, public utility service commitments, public facilities, the operations of a facility for the providing of video service, telecommunications service, or internet access service directly or indirectly to the public? Those words should sound familiar because we just showed them in that exception. Or related municipal infrastructure improvements associated with a large-scale data center development within or affecting the village. So that is what the village board is going to be presented with tomorrow. They're going to vote on it. If it passes, this will be what's sent to the county to place on the ballot. I think most people are frustrated with referendums when you read them. I know I am, because sometimes it's hard to even understand them. And I just the village thought it was important at this meeting to kind of pull back the curtain to show you why it got worded this way. And I think we're being very creative to make this happen and do what the village board unanimously voted for last week. So that's where we are with the process.
And again, with that process, we have to have it to the county by June 2nd to get on the ballot. With this, I understand this is a confusing point, so again, the community's been doing a lot of great outreach to our area. Again, my belief is on this verbiage here, right? Should we support? If you don't want a data center, it's going to be no, and you guys need to spread that message. If you do want a data center and you want to support all that whole paragraph, then you put yes, right? So,
and we'll have a couple months to.
So you have to have that message.
This is non-binding, correct, and there is no binding.
There is no way we can do it binding.
Accept it tomorrow or whatever.
This would be an advisory referendum. There is no legal way to do it.
So there is no
binding.
protection, no. I just want to clarify stuff.
And what would be the election date on the ballot?
August 11th.
August 11th, okay.
Can the county say no to that?
The county doesn't have,
I wouldn't.
Is there somebody that can say no to it?
You mean to say, don't put this on the ballot?
You can't.
Can stop it?
Yeah, I think honestly, the only way, practically speaking, I think someone would have to go to court.
Isn't that why we have a board? Aren't boards meant to make decisions that benefit the people of the community and they serve?
I'm just, listen, sir, I'm doing what the board's directing.
So the board should say no, and everyone in here, this is how important your votes are. From a national level to a small level, so don't forget it. Don't
Any
forget
other
those elected
questions?
officials, who if they let this pass,
Shame on them.
shame on them.
Any other
They
referendum
shouldn't be in their
questions?
position.
Well, and again, to some of the points that were kind of discussed through this session, there is no zoning that'll accept this currently. There has to be a zoning process. We don't have the acreage in the village of Wrightstown to build something like this currently. There have to be annexation.
Good.
And that
So they
process-
said if we say no, they'll wash their hands and walk away. I think you hear us, we're all saying no.
Yeah.
But they're looking for land in the town of Wrightstown right now.
So this gentleman had his hands up. Is it about the referendum? We're over time.
Just real quick question, just in transparency.
You gotta support the town of
Would you work
Wrightstown.
on behalf of Fort Washington
That's
with
really
Cloverleaf?
600.
Not with Cloverleaf, but
Yeah,
it's
that's
on the other
important.
side.
Negotiation for
You
Fort
just got
Yes,
it.
and I did what the council directed me to do
to the
there, just like I
village.
did.
They're still letting all of
Is
us
there
off on them. And when are they gonna have these
Okay,
open meetings
true.
there?
It's only village, I mean, you can go to your town board and see if they'll put something on, but the,
Yes.
the village board is doing that, yes.
Who's the town
One
board
of
of
the
Wrightstown?
property owners refused to sell their property, does that mix the whole program?
Sir. I have no idea. But I know we're over time, so that's all I wanted to repeat that presentation we gave at the beginning, so you knew what the village board was doing. Thank you.
All right. I want to thank everybody for being here.
Well, that's the next question I truly want to ask the people, so I just need a yes or a no out of the group. I know with some of the feedback, after this meeting, I was kind of asked to have, both sides at the table and do it, and then I also saw messages saying, why are we even having it? We don't want it. Do we want another listening session, or just let this have a referendum and all the other things, right? And again, I can't see there's necessarily a process, there's no proposal, we don't have zoning, and we don't have the land in the village. I know many, from the feedback I've received in many different fashions, you don't necessarily believe or trust me, but part of that message where we said we had to have a better strategy, better game plan, was I didn't want to end up in this shit show that we're in right now. I wanted to be able to educate our board. I wanted to be able to educate our community, because when I talked to the town of Wrightstown, I talked to the village of Greenleaf, that was what they told me was the first thing is, we don't know anything about it, we don't have any information, we don't have any of these things. And they're like, we couldn't get out in front of it. So that's hopefully this process. But do you want another session? We will have it on Sunday, and we'll talk, and we'll try getting speakers again.
Yeah,
The board should be here.
They were invited already, but,
Travis, what about the moratorium? So I believe there's an excessive amount of required signatures. So I suppose is a moratorium something we can do in addition to the referendum?
the biggest struggle I have for the moratorium, and this was from both Chris and Bob Gagan, was with the moratorium, there's two basically qualifiers. One, and don't quote me because I'm not gonna read it exactly out of the statute, but the first qualifier basically says there has to be lack of utilities in your community, or an overburdensome or overburdenedness to your utility, and you have to have an engineer's opinion on that to as a qualifier. And then the next one is it's basically on health and safety, and there has to be an engineering opinion or a healthcare professional that gives that opinion as well. The struggle that I got from our legal counsel, both Bob and Chris, is depending on what this could be, depend on the professional. Maybe Paula would give that opinion, maybe not, but I know many engineers, if I asked them to stamp a project that they never saw before or didn't have a proposal for or a plan for, they probably wouldn't stamp it. So to give that engineering opinion, I'm not sure if we can get that, but we would definitely try the moratorium. But neither legal counsel, the only one that we thought potentially could go was the referendum. I called the Lakeshore folks that have moratoriums. I called Greenville, asked them about how they're doing their moratorium. I called Madison, I asked how they're getting past their qualifiers for that. No one had answers for me. They just said, we're hoping that it holds.
There is
Or a resolution.
What's that?
You do a resolution.
Well, a moratorium is the resolution, but to actually make it binding, the moratorium. And again, I've been on the phone nonstop with lawyers around the state, for all the people that had moratoriums. No one can give me the direct answer on how they're using or finding the qualifier.
Good.
Find out.
All right, I want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.